Game of Thrones Revolution. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 Prisoners. 1. Sir Robert, please remember my words. Now is not the time. Don't say a word. The power behind the sword dancer became more mysterious, but Robert didn't care. These few days were the most relaxing and enjoyable time in more than 10 years. All the rights, obligations and bullshit responsibilities left him with the bells of the great cathedral. He was now a complete fighter, relaxed and happy. Don't talk nonsense, little girl. I know what to do. At least I haven't thought about sitting on the boring Iron Throne again. He looked at Violet carefully. Since he knew that Joffrey liked this girl, she became a kind of Myrcella in his eyes. Even if he knew the truth and understood that the 3 children were not his own, he still couldn't change this view. The feelings of so many years always worked. Robert didn't hate Joffrey. Although everyone, including himself, felt that he should tear the woman apart angrily, he couldn't accumulate anger. Some were mocking contempt. What he wanted to do was to run to the self-righteous woman and laugh at her loudly. What? The pearl of the Lannister family, the star of the Westerlands, is just a bitch who doesn't know the etiquette of human relations. He really wanted to see Joffrey's expression when she faced him again. Unfortunately, the time was not right, and he really didn't want to go back to be a king. The situation developed rapidly. King's Landing had undergone earth-shaking changes. In addition to getting some information from the sword dancer, he spent most of his time recovering in the house. In fact, he had never left King's Landing, not even far away from the Red Keep, and lived next door to Violet, in the room that originally belonged to Sig. Every day, Violet personally changed his dressings, cleaned his and healed wounds, and helped him recover. The petite Violet was very much like his daughter, an angel who only existed in his dreams and belonged to him. During this time, he imagined her as his daughter-in-law. Even if Joffrey was not his son, even if in reality, Joffrey's chances were slim, he still hoped so. In the final analysis, Joffrey's actions were too consistent with his temperament, and he was simply a replica of his youth. It would be great if Joffrey was really his son. However, Robert was deeply dissatisfied with being confined to a small room and not allowed to go out every day. He also had to follow the so-called exercise and rehabilitation standards to complete a series of tiring movements. Whenever Violet urged him to complete the necessary rehabilitation movements, he really wanted to slam the food plate into the little girl's face. After all, Robert resisted the urge to do so. It would be too unkind to do so. The injuries caused by the damn wild boar were really shocking. Even if Violet used some magical method to keep him away from infection and suppuration, he felt that it was a miracle that he survived. When he got off the ground and walked slowly, what he saw in the mirror was not the fat man with a big belly that he had been familiar with for more than 10 years, but a skinny guy. Since that day, he did not need the sword dancer to urge him and began to work hard on rehabilitation. He could not tolerate the weak self. Not too long, he felt the wound on his abdomen itching, and his muscles felt an indescribable soreness. Violet told him that this was a sign of recovery, and that he could use more drastic means to recover. She made a regular plan for him, and added sword swinging, boulder lifting and squatting to the recovery exercises. The series of exercises reminded him of his youth in the Vale of Arryn, where he either practiced martial arts or went out hunting every day. The courses set by the maesters were always a headache. He and Ned skipped classes in various ways and went to the wild to have fun. It was during the time that his first child was born. He gradually liked this relaxed life, and when he was considering disguising himself and leaving the Red Keep to find some fun in the streets of love, Violet found him and asked him to help meet someone. He felt like he was being pulled back to his old world. Although he was a little resistant, he really cared about how his old friend was doing. He was going to visit Ned. Robert agreed without hesitation. Please comfort him, the little girl said seriously. Robert carefully examined the vial she handed over. This contains a potion to treat infection and suppuration. It is said that Lord Ned is injured and the conditions in prison will definitely not be good. In order to avoid irreversible damage to his body, it is best to give him this potion immediately. Robert nodded. He believed in Violet. I need you to explain the situation to Lord Ned and tell him what will happen in 2 days. Let him prepare and hide underground. When the time is right, he will go to the wall with you and become a pillar there. For a moment, Robert wanted to ask if all this was a conspiracy by the octopus spider or Littlefinger to pull all competitors off the throne. But the matter was too incredible, and he also saw more incredible magic. Most importantly, he liked this state. Although the wall sounded boring, being able to fight and kill, and having fun from time to time was the life he dreamed of. Why not? He said to himself. Little girl, you don't need to teach me what to do. I've been king for 18 years. He took the medicine bottle and clean bandages from Violet. It is said that these things can prevent the injury from getting worse after special treatment. By the way, where's Stannis? Did he escape back to Dragonstone? Let me tell you, if he were to rule the Seven Kingdoms, he would definitely ban all the prostitutes and keep every man under his control. The Seven Kingdoms would be destroyed in his hands. At least it would be a boring world that makes people want to commit suicide. Violet's expression seemed to say, isn't this great? But what she said was another matter. That's not necessarily true. Lord Stannis may become king, but Joffrey is not bad either. Joffrey's actions have exceeded expectations. Maybe he is the best candidate for the protector of the Seven Kingdoms. Robert spent a long time looking at the little girl, unable to see any conspiracy or cover-up. So where are Stannis, his people, and that witch? Won't they take the opportunity to seize King's Landing? As you guessed, they have left King's Landing and returned to Dragonstone. I believe there will be a chance to meet them in the future. I don't want to see my boring brother again. Robert muttered, is there anything else you want to take? Do you want me to sneak in? Robert has lived in the Red Castle for so many years, but this is the first time he has gone down to the secret passage. He knows that there are countless secret passages in the Red Castle, but he has always sneered at these facilities. As a brave warrior, he will not learn from those rats and needs secret passages to protect himself. The secret passage is very narrow. Even though he is not so fat now, he still has to bend over to pass through it smoothly. They chose the middle of the night and sneaked underground from the hidden entrance of the September. No one knew where Violet knew about the secret passage, or how she found out where it led. After a long journey, up and down, sometimes walking on muddy ground, sometimes wading through water, when the iron gate finally appeared in front of them, the light of the torches through the gate was like the fireflies of hell seen from the dark underworld. They waited behind the door for a while. After the dungeon guard passed, the little girl stretched out her prosthetic limb, which was shining with mysterious luster, and just twisted the lock of the iron gate lightly. With a click, the fine steel lock broke. Robert knew that Violet was not simple, but he was still shocked to see that she had such great strength. He asked himself that he was also extremely powerful in the Seven Kingdoms and was called a giant. In terms of strength, it was estimated that no one could match it except the mountain. At his peak, he should not be able to break the lock so easily. She took Robert and followed the guard. The guards seemed to be distributing food, holding small clay pots in their hands, opening each dungeon, and first kicking the prisoners roughly to determine whether they were alive or dead. The prisoners were either silent, or wailing, or begging loudly or shouting loudly, but the guards ignored them, threw the clay pots in, kicked the begging people away roughly, and then continued. Please, tell me what's going on outside, I'm Eddard Stark, Winterfell. The nostalgic voice sounded, and was immediately interrupted by the guards shouting and kicking. Robert really wanted to go up and break the guard's neck, but fortunately Violet stopped him. She motioned for him to wait at the door of the cell. The sword dancer was as light as flowing water, and she flashed behind the guard at a very fast speed. Without seeing her make any other moves, the guard's body tilted and fell to the ground. She fumbled around the guard and soon took out a bunch of keys. We don't have much time. You go in and talk to Lord Ned. I'll keep the guards asleep. Isn't it to rescue Ned? We can do it now. If someone finds out, I will make that person shut up without a sound. Robert's vision was blood red. Seeing Ned being abused, he wanted to calm the anger in his chest with human blood. Chapter 102 Prisoners 2. The cell door creaked open, and a foul smell hit him. It was the smell of urine from the straw on the floor, the smell of feces, and the smell of rotten mold, which made him want to vomit. With the help of the torchlight, he could roughly see everything in the cell. The walls were light red, made of saltpeter, and the door was a great thick wooden board, probably an oak board, 4 feet thick, and inlaid with iron nails. There were no windows or vents in the room, and the floor was covered with straw. There was nothing else, not even a swill bucket. A figure was buried in the smelly straw. He curled up with an empty clay pot next to him. It was the dinner given by the guard. Robert walked forward and stood beside the empty clay pot. He kicked the pot over and saw a few leaves and some things that looked like potato peels in the narrow container. Damn it, even animals should eat better. Robert's loud voice woke the person in the straw. The figure moved, and he covered his eyes with his arm, as if the dim torchlight was also a kind of damage to his eyes. Robert threw a can over, which was iced yogurt. According to Violet, people who have been starving in the dungeon for a long time can drink this to reduce the risk of choking to death. I don't know where the little girl got this experience from, but when he thought of the serious, great and perfect night Eddard Stark choking to death in the dungeon, Robert almost laughed out loud. Ned touched the can. He held it tightly with both hands, and swallowed the thick and lumpy yogurt with an indescribable gesture, as if he had never eaten anything. Robert thought of a metaphor called the reincarnation of a starving ghost. Ned drank the yogurt, letting the juice flow from the corners of his mouth and seep into his beard. Robert stared at him in a daze, with an indescribable feeling in his heart. Ned's life was worse than his dead ghost. How long has it been? Ned finally stopped and asked weakly. Time has no meaning for you, Robert said. He was going to find a place to sit down, but finally gave up after several efforts. Ned, you are not as good as me in this state. Ned's reaction was very slow. He shook his head, as if thinking. It took a long time for him to react. Labor protection. His surprise was so intense that he did not ask in-depth questions but kept coughing. After finally stopping coughing, he couldn't wait to stretch out his skinny hand to touch Robert's face. Am I dead? Are you here to pick me up? Good brother. Robert had no choice but to bend down as much as possible so that Ned could touch him. No, you are not dead yet. The gods are cruel. They let me, a person who was disemboweled by a wild boar, life well, but let you, a person who was dedicated to maintaining justice, become like this. Seeing that Ned seemed to be a little sober, Robert took out the prepared wineskin. This is fruit wine, what you need. There is medicine in it that can save you from more pain and disease. Robert took the wineskin and took a sip. He pretended to vomit. Is this wine leaves? Yes, it's good for you and can save your life. No matter what you are like before, you are now a death row prisoner. Bitter, sour or sweet, you have no choice. Drink it, it's good for you. Aren't you dead? Yes, dead. The bells of the Great September have been ringing all night and almost deafened me. Joffrey is about to take the throne, and you're a traitor. Robert paid attention to the movement outside, wondering whether to speed up. Let me see you. Ned said weakly. Oh, you have been a troublemaker all your life. Robert walked outside the cell, took out a torch, and walked in. Ned's eyes squinted because of the strong light. He tried hard to open them, tears streaming down his face. After a while, as if his eyes had gotten used to the intensity of the torchlight, he looked Robert up and down with an expression of disbelief. You are still the same Robert. He knew why Ned said that. Compared to the fat guy who couldn't even wear a breastplate, he looked more like a young man. Although he was no longer handsome, his figure and expression were similar. Gods, look at the two of us, we have fallen into this situation. You are locked up in a dungeon, and you are neither human nor ghost. I almost died at the feet of a pig. We were the golden combination to fight for the throne together. Ned lowered his head. I'm sorry for deceiving you. He seemed to have something else to say, but he didn't. You are a stubborn fool. Robert snorted. You are arrogant and look like a perfect knight, but you just won't listen to others' advice. I am the king, do you understand? I am the only one above everyone else, and you won't agree even when I beg you. Looking at his weak and almost unrecognizable brother, he couldn't get angry at all. Stark, can self-esteem be eaten? Can a sense of honor save your life? Damn bastard, you not only hurt yourself, but also those who trusted you, and me. Yeah. Ned's answer was extremely weak. I have nothing else to do but recall the past. I dreamed of the tournament that year. I dreamed that when Rhaegar put the wreath in Lyanna's hand, there was silence all around. The nightmare began from that moment. I also saw her lying on the bloody bed. Ned's voice trembled. God save me, I'm going crazy. Robert frowned. Time was running out. Footsteps were heard in the corridor. But Ned's mental problems seemed to be more serious than his physical problems. He walked out of the cell quickly and ran into Violet. How is it? Have you eaten? Did you tell me what happened? Robert shook his head. It's too late to tell me. Ned's mind is not very clear, and the wound has not been treated in time. Let's do it next time. Let's go. With Violet's push, the two aided at a gap in the long corridor. Then they saw the previous guard being helped out, shouting that he was not drunk. 5 days later, the two came to the dungeon again. This time they did not alarm the guards. The key was prepared by Violet in advance. Robert was sharper and more energetic than the previous few days, as if he was 10 years younger. Violet was watching in the corridor, and Robert approached the cell. Renly. This was the first sentence Ned said after seeing Robert. Robert decided to remember this incident for the rest of his life. This was the capital for him to laugh at Ned for the rest of his life. Having learned his lesson, Robert bought Ned yogurt and wine lees with potions. While Ned was wolfing down the food, he checked his leg injury. To be honest, based on Robert's inspection on the battlefield, Ned's leg was not in good condition. The wound was festering and rotting, and white worms were on the mottled wound one after another. He quickly helped Ned clean the wound and applied the potion given by Violet. He carefully checked Ned's leg bones. Fortunately, the bones were not broken. After that, Ned almost finished eating. Ned stared at Robert for a long while. I can't believe it. Since you are not dead, why don't you return to the throne? I don't know the current situation, but I guess it won't be very good. I'm fucking afraid of people like you. You always talk about responsibilities and obligations. He wanted to slap Ned on the shoulder, just like before, but after seeing his weak look, he shook his head. Unlucky, I'm already dead. At least in name, the Lord who saved me seemed to think that my resurrection would arouse the wrath of the gods. He asked me to go to the wall and be a night watchman after my injury healed. Ned looked at him puzzledly. You agreed? Of course I agreed. Do you think I like this Iron Throne? I told you before that if it weren't for the children, I would have quit and gone to the free cities to be a free knight. He looked longing. You don't know how frustrated I have been all these years. I can't do anything, I can't go anywhere, and I can't even participate in a damn tournament in person. Now, the children are not mine, and I have no responsibilities and obligations to them. Ned's expression was a complex one of relief. So you knew everything. I thought you would. What did you think I would do? Kill Tressa, that unfaithful bitch, skin Jaime, and then strangle all 3 children to death. He saw the fear in Ned's eyes. That's why you didn't tell me the truth. You underestimated me. I'm not that kind of person. Chapter 103 Prisoners. 3. You want to kill the little girl on the prairie and our unborn child, Ned said stubbornly, with accusation clearly on his face. Robert really wanted to punch him, but considering that this guy was weak and might not be able to withstand his punch, he gave up. You. That's different. Maybe you are right. The gods sent giant wild boars to punish me for the crime of assassinating pregnant women and children. But I have my own reasons. If a woman and a child are weighed on the scales of tens of thousands of soldiers and hundreds of thousands of subjects in the 7 kingdoms, I will choose the latter. Ned turned his head. He knew that the two of them could not agree on this point. But Joffrey is different. This kid has been influenced by me. He is not only my adopted son, but also has a similar character to me. He is even stronger than me and has a greater chance of being a good king. Instead of letting bastards like Stannis or Renly inherit the throne, what's wrong with my adopted son? Do you hate your brothers so much? After a while, Ned said, legally they are your heirs. I would rather let the illegitimate son of a blacksmith be king. Robert responded, and there was silence between the two for a long time. My daughters, I thought you had forgotten them for the sake of justice and law. Robert muttered, Arya escaped from that bastard Meereen. We haven't found her yet, and the sword dancers will go looking for her tomorrow. This can be regarded as the mercy of the gods. Although Joffrey doesn't love her, judging from his character, he won't do anything to her. I am more worried about Tressa, the vicious whore. Look, you're still brooding over the fact that the children are not yours. Ned said, don't think that what you say is nice and it won't matter. If you have power, maybe her and the children's heads would have been stuck on the spears of the Red Castle. TSK, men and women are different. I don't know what will happen if you tell the truth. Robert said frankly, anyway, I no longer have power, and I don't plan to continue to be king of Shrovesy, so I have to let her go for the time being. Robert continued, Sansa is still Joffrey's fiancée. Tressa planned to keep her by her side, but Joffrey took her away. Now she lives with Myrcella. To be honest, Joffrey is really surprising. He was so cowardly and boring when he was a child, but now he has become more decent. If he is really my child, how great it would be. Ned also sighed, yeah, if he is really your son, I will definitely help him with all my strength. With the help of the sword dancer, he already has the qualifications to be a wise monarch, which is much better than your bullshit governance. Ha ha ha, Robert lowered his voice halfway through laughing, people are all kinds of people. I am the kind who can't be idle. It's a fucking joke for me to be king. Time passed quickly. He saw Violet gesturing outside, signaling him to speed up. Ned, I guess you already know that you are doomed. Tressa won't kill me. Ned said, his expression was a little dazed, as if he was drunk, or it might be because he hadn't eaten for too long. Kate. Her brother is in her hands. Not the brother she loves. Robert gritted his teeth and said, it is said that he has escaped. Your Kate was too impulsive. She caught the little devil but let him go. As a result, you were the unlucky one. Then cut my throat quickly and give me a quick death. Ned leaned back and fell into the straw. You are such a bastard. I can't watch you die. Besides, why should I stand on the side of the whore? I came to you because we have a plan. Plan. There is no need to go through so much trouble. You ran to the front of the Great September and shouted that the king is back, and everything would be solved. But what did you do? You watched me and my men being slaughtered and hid in the dark without saying a word. Ned accused again. Robert scratched his head in annoyance. You bastard, you brought this upon yourself. You even harmed me, and you still have the nerve to blame me. He stood up. Things are not as simple as you think. They are too complicated for me to explain clearly. Anyway, I can't show up in public now. I bet you that if I show up in the court, they will dare to publicly scold me as an impostor and then let the soldiers drop me up. As for me personally, I never want to go back to the Iron Throne again, even if you force me with a knife. Ned looked at Robert. Save me now. I can do those things myself. Of course I can't save you from here, otherwise I wouldn't come to this stinky place. Robert slowed down his speech and carefully considered his words. He was not good at choosing. But now is not the time. From the perspective of the Lord behind the scenes, it will be a big problem for you to leave King's Landing, so you need to be killed and become a ghost in the dark like me. Ned looked at Robert again as if he was meeting him for the first time. I don't understand. Why are you so fussy? If you don't want to help, just let me rot in the dungeon. Sighing again, Robert remembered that there was something important to say. There will be a trial in 2 days. Tressele and others want you to plead guilty. Never. Ned said firmly. I knew you would do this. Anyway, you'll be beheaded no matter what. By then, you'll be the same as me. The person who saved me will also contact you, and you will understand everything. What is your purpose? Robert, we trained, lived, and fought together in the past. I know you very well, but I don't understand why you do this. You don't seem like the kind of person who would be inferior to others. Just because he saved your life, will you obey a person who doesn't want to show up? Everything is to fight against and destroy the existing destiny. Robert frowned, searching for a suitable explanation carefully, but failed in the end. That's too complicated and hard to describe. Anyway, it's necessary to prevent the tragedy from continuing. Why do you care about me? Can't you just be honest and stop asking too many questions and just cooperate for once? Robert glared at Ned fiercely. Don't always stand on the moral high ground. Tell me, were you crazy or something, running to Tressele and telling you that you know Joffrey's true identity? Although you're a bit old-fashioned, you are not that stupid. Do you understand that everything now is caused by the stupid things you did, including my death? Merciful madness. Ned's voice was low and depressed. That's it. Robert pointed out, you, Lord Eddard Stark, you're such an upright bastard. He was rarely angry. I thought I would never get this feeling from you in my life. Now I have to say that it is your damn responsibility, obligation and integrity that messed up everything. He suddenly felt that this statement was so damn right and so damn satisfying. Yes, it's you who messed up everything. Now the people of the Seven Kingdoms are suffering and war is raging. The Baratheons, Lannisters, Otterons and Starks are all falling apart. Who do you think is to blame? It's you, bastard, you bastard perfect knight. You really speak the truth. Ned lowered his head and said sadly. Robert shook his head more and more angrily. You're like this. Every time I scold you, you pretend to be hurt. The person who was hurt the most by you has to consider your feelings. Who do you say the gods have spared? How can there be fairness? He suddenly understood why the mysterious figure behind Violet claimed to challenge the gods. If he didn't blame the gods for such an unfair and ironic fate, could he really blame himself? He looked at Ned. It was impossible to blame this poor bastard. Robert, can you take a letter for me? Ned said with difficulty. If it was before I met you, of course I would agree. Robert felt that he had really come to a sudden realization. The problem that had been bothering him like a fog suddenly became clear. Looking at Ned, his brother of a different surname, it was as if he saw Ned trapped in the fog and wandering around. Pity and rebuke rose at the same time. Now, I won't agree. Why? Ned seemed to be deceived and betrayed, and the deep vertical lines between his eyebrows made people pity him. Don't be like that. You owe me more, and you've messed up everything. Robert told him. But I won't. I'm beginning to admire the guy who saved me. Maybe someday I can meet him and talk, instead of communicating with him in my dreams. It's unlucky. I don't want to communicate with a wizard. He glanced at the corridor. Let me tell you a few things. First of all, you will be like me, dead on the surface but actually in the dark. The wall is our destination, but one to go is up to us. Our ship is not weak now, including Joffrey, me, that bastard Stannis, and the largest khalasar in the Dothraki Sea. The last point, maybe tonight, or in a few days, the instigator of everything will meet you, the wizard. You will see him in your dreams. Don't think it was just a dream. After Robert hurriedly explained, he was dragged out of the cell by Violet before he could say goodbye to Ned. They only had time to hastily lock the cell door, and the footsteps of the guards were heard. The two of them disappeared into the darkness silently. The door of the old house was closed tightly, and everything that had just happened seemed like a lie. Chapter 104 Prisoners 4. There was a sound of chains colliding outside the cell. At this time, Sig took over Ned's body. If Ned had been tortured physically and mentally for the past month, and was imprisoned in this dark cell and moldy, which was an unbearable punishment, then Sig brought him another kind of fear. He squeezed Ned's soul into a corner of his mind. Ned could still feel the information received by his five senses, and experience emotions such as happiness, discomfort, and distress. He still felt hungry, thirsty, and in pain, but he could not control this body, and could not even blink or turn his head. This is a real imprisonment, which is hundreds of times more terrifying than physical imprisonment, especially for those who do not know the truth. Sig did this intentionally in order to make the stinky and hard Ned suffer real pain to soften his obsession with honor and even sense of obligation. In other words, he hated this guy. People who stand on the moral high ground all day long are particularly annoying. Even if he is a practitioner, people are reluctant to accept him. To put it more bluntly, Sig is taking the opportunity to play a trick on people. The door suddenly opened. Some acting skills were needed here. After all, his body had been treated and he had 2 food supplies during the journey. Ned's body was not as fragile as it had been in prison for a long time. He stretched out his hands to support the damp wall and crawled towards the light, deliberately making an expression of desire and fear. The strong light of the torch made him squint. This time it was not acting. Food. He squeezed his throat and said, "I brought wine." A voice responded. Maybe it was the guard, Ned thought in the corner of his mind. It was a fat guy wearing a leather cloak and a spiked steel helmet. "Lord Eddard, drink it quickly." The man stuffed the wine back into his hand. Ned was curious about this voice because he had heard it before, but he couldn't remember who it was. Sig didn't need to go through so much trouble. He could see through all disguises. Their eyes. He asked weakly, pretending the need to reach out and touch the other person's face to confirm. "I'm not dreaming, it's really you." Sig felt that it was too exaggerated, and he couldn't help but reflect. Octopus spider's makeup skills are simply the pinnacle, and his fat cheeks are covered with short stubble. The pretentious eunuch suddenly transformed into a bearded jailer. The most amazing thing is that the smell of sweat and strong liquor emanating from his body is simply lifelike. "My lord, don't you feel disgusted? You are always wearing silk and satin, and your body always exudes fragrance. Where do you get sweat and strong liquor from?" He decided not to cover it up anymore. "Strong liquor is not difficult, but the smell of sweat is my exclusive secret." "There, I said, my lord, drink it quickly, fruit wine is a luxury in this place." The real Ned in his body was panicked. Sig looked up at the eunuch. "Is this the wine they gave Robert to drink?" "You really make me sad." The pretentiousness came out again. Really, no one likes eunuchs. As he said this, Octopus Spider took the wine bag and drank a few gulps by himself, and red liquid flowed from the corners of his mouth. "This is not as good as the red wine you offered me during the tournament, but please believe me, I never poisoned it." Sig picked up the wine bag and took a few gulps. He smacked his lips with an unsatisfied look. "Wine lees are good for prisoners. 1 gulp can sustain a person for several days." "Yes, my lord, you are really knowledgeable. I believe you already know that the time is approaching," the octopus spider said sincerely. "They won't kill me." Sig stretched and saw doubt in the eyes of the octopus spider. "This wine is a bit strong. Do you want to confuse me? For prisoners, what can happen even if they are drunk?" He narrowed his eyes and stared at the bewildered eunuch. "You want me to confess, right?" Ned's face showed a mocking smile, an expression that would never have appeared on his face before. "My lord, you don't seem to care about what's happening outside. How is your daughter? How will the North deal with the current situation? Who will ascend the throne as king? And how are your subordinates, etc.?" the octopus spider asked doubtfully. In a corner of his heart, a feeling of regret, sadness, and even the desire to end it all arose. Sig decisively cut off this emotion, and not even a muscle on his face trembled. The octopus spider opposite looked disappointed. "I have no interest in you at all," the octopus spider continued. "Then what are you doing here? I thought you cared about the country and wanted to save me," Sig said in a bad tone. "Are you blaming me for standing by and watching?" The octopus frowned. "My good lord, you think too highly of me. What could I do when I was surrounded by the Lannisters? Unarmed and without armor?" The eunuch looked at him curiously. "When I was a child, before I became a eunuch, I used to make a living with a troop. The most important thing they taught me was that everyone has their own role. There is no difference between the play and the outside world. The court needs law enforcement officers to be fierce, the finance minister to be good at making money, and the captain of the Iron Guard to be brave and unparalleled, and I, the intelligence chief, need to be cunning, flattering, and do things perfectly. An intelligence chief full of justice is as useless as a cowardly knight. This time, Sid carefully observed the eunuch and found that he became much more pleasing to the eye. Maybe he could recruit such a person as his subordinate. You can rescue me from the dungeon. I can, but why should I do this? Then the eunuch realized something. You are using an affirmative tone, you are teasing me. I am testing your character, my dear lord. Sid was very curious about how long it would take the eunuch to explain his purpose. My lord, you must be blaming me. Sid shook his head, but the eunuch still looked helpless. But you should know that eunuchs have no honor, and spiders cannot care about their self-esteem. I don't think you will deliver the letter for me either. It depends on the content of the letter. If you need me to, I will ask someone to prepare paper and pen. After writing it, I will read it carefully once, or even several times. Whether to send it out depends on whether the letter agrees with my personal wishes. The octopus spider said. Don't beat around the bush, my dear lord, you are different from me. I have plenty of time now, and you are an important official of the kingdom, very busy. Do you really have so much time to beat around the bush with me? Sid finally caught the eunuch's language error and decided to take the initiative in speaking. The eunuch looked distressed. My lord, I never thought you were so eloquent, peace. He said firmly, if there's anyone in the court who sincerely hopes that King Robert will live a long life, it is me. He sighed, and Sid tried to find flaws in the eunuch's expression to pass the time. For so many years, I did my best to protect him from conspiracy, but I didn't expect him to be harmed by his best brother. Are you crazy? Go tell the Queen Mother that you know little Job's true identity. His heart ached. Even though he was imprisoned in the spiritual realm, Ned's pain was transmitted to his body and mind. Sid cut off the surging waves of emotions again with an expressionless face. Obviously I'm not a normal person. I'm really curious, how could you expect me to be a normal person? The eunuch was choked and couldn't speak for a long time. Maybe I really misjudged you. After all, people like you are so rare. He wiped the sweat off his face. When I saw what honesty and honor have brought you, I finally understood why there are so few people like you. Sid agreed in his heart, but he remained calm. The real Ned was very depressed and blamed himself. The eunuch looked at him curiously. I'm curious, don't you blame yourself? No guilt at all. You should be an upright and honest person, standing on the moral high ground to despise others, using inappropriate honor to disrupt the normal process, and finally recalling the past with regret and self-blame. These are your proper reactions. Sid almost laughed out loud and ran up to hug the damn eunuch. He resisted the urge to say your insights are really great. He just shrugged, what's the difference? Anyway, if I don't reveal the Queen's secret, he'll fall off the horse, or happen to be shot by a poisonous arrow, or even bitten by a poisonous snake, etc. Robert's fate is doomed, so what does the process matter? The eunuch stared at him in disbelief. Lord Ned, I really don't understand, since you are such a wise man, why would you? Because I'm not a normal person. Okay, octopus spider, stop wasting time, how well do you know me? Don't think your little bird can tell you everything, there are too many things in the world that you don't know. Don't waste our time, what's the matter? Using Ned's body to release a fierce momentum. The eunuch took 2 steps back in fear. Chapter 105 Prisoners 5 From the beginning, Viserys had been trying to gain the upper hand, trying to make Ned think he knew everything, trying to make him feel irresistible. Unfortunately, the opponent of the octopus spider was not the upright and vulnerable Ned, but Sigurd. The real devil. The Queen Mother will come back to visit you tomorrow. The eunuch said this reluctantly. Why? He didn't even raise his eyelids. My lord, the Queen Mother is very afraid of you, and she is also afraid of others. Her dear King Eater is fighting in the river, and Lady Laisa has her own army and occupies a natural barrier, and can rush down the mountain at any time. In the Dorne territory, Lord Martell is still obsessed with the death of Princess Elia and her child. What's more, your son has crossed the neck with the elite of the north. Ned's soul was restless again. Sigurd's mind was filled with shots of Rob as just a child. Haha, many people will be restless. He chuckled. Excuse me, sir, aren't you worried that your son is too young to lead an army? The doubt on the eunuch's face seemed to be stuck. Why should I worry? Why do you think the Northerners are so strong? Sid used Ned's face to make a scary expression as much as possible. He found that Ned was not that kind of person. He showed a gloomy look at most. I suggest that Lord Viserys consider leaving a way out so that you can have the best of both worlds when facing the situation where my son's army is at the gates of the city. The expression on Varys' face was really wonderful. It was really refreshing to see him busy digging out a response plan in his mind. The guy who was always weird and always plotting to pry into other people's privacy has finally come to this day. Sid felt the same as Ned. Robb is just a child. How can he threaten the lords of King's Landing? Sigurd changed his words. The problem is that he is a child with a large army after all. Even if he is young and inexperienced, it still takes time to deal with him. I am afraid that my lovely son's interference will give Stannis the fleet on Dragonstone more room to operate. And Lord Renly, who was loved by the people, will need time to assemble an army. My son can give him enough time. The eunuch's forehead was covered with sweat and his hands were shaking. The Queen, no, now I should call her the Queen Mother. I can foresee her fear. When her father and brother dealt with my poor child, Stannis took the opportunity to land and proclaim himself king, and chopped off her son's head with beautiful curly hair. Of course she was not having an easy time. Although I prefer to believe that she cares more about the child. Varys gasped as if he had a toothache. I assure you that the Queen Mother will not like your words. Lord Stannis does have a chance to get the throne, but if you don't control your tongue, what will greet him will be your rotten head. The octopus spider wiped the sweat from his face. It's a pity that Sansa tried so hard to plead for you. If not for others, you should at least pity your poor daughter. When the octopus spider mentioned Sansa, Ned's heart twitched violently, and the uncomfortable feeling mixed with fatherly love and guilt and other emotions was like a raging wave hitting the embankment. Fortunately, it was not Ned who dealt with the octopus spider, otherwise he would have fallen into his trap. Tressette is not stupid. She knows that a tamed wolf is much more useful than a dead one. After saying this, the octopus spider was sweating profusely. Sigurd estimated that the makeup on the eunuch's face would flow down his cheeks like melted water, along with his facial features. He had a feeling that Varys' appearance was not real, and no one knew his actual appearance. This was the important reason why he could hide his true appearance and come and go at will. Everyone who could survive in King's Landing was not simple. Even someone as strong as Sigurd felt that he had to be cautious. This woman murdered my king, slaughtered my men, and crippled my son, and you want me to serve her? This sentence was what Ned really said, and Sigurd was just relaying it. I want you to serve the country, Varys said. All you have to do is promise to confess your treason, order your son to lay down his arms, honor Joffrey as king, and call Stannis and Renly ungrateful traitors. All problems can be solved. The Blue-Eyed Lyness knows that you are consistent with your words. I believe she will agree that you are black and spend the rest of your life with your brother and the bastard on the wall. When Jon was mentioned, Ned felt a sharp pain in his heart again. Sigurd almost sprayed the dreads on Varys' bald head. This man's heart is as sensitive as a woman, he sighed. From the memory or knowledge of the real Ned, his father always wanted to sit down and have a good talk with the bastard. What puzzled Sigurd the most was that Ned did have a deep affection for Jon, but it was not like the affection between father and son, but more like treating brothers and sisters. Is there any hidden secret about Jon's life experience? He planned to study Jon's note carefully afterwards. Maybe he could get some useful information from the memory of the world. There was a sharp pain in his leg. It was true that the speed of healing was related to his mood. He hadn't felt such pain for a long time. He frowned, opened and closed his fingers. Whose idea was this? He said while taking a breath. For Ned's health and his injuries, Sig forced Ned to drink more lees. Could it be a plan between you and Littlefinger? The octopus spider laughed very interestingly. Let me partner with him. No, I would rather marry a black sheep. He is the second most cunning lord in the Seven Kingdoms. Haha, I will indeed select all useful information to satisfy his appetite and make him think that I am his person. I know, just like you would select the necessary information for the Queen and let her think so, you will do the same to me, right? The information that comes out of your mouth may be true, but it will never be complete. You will always miss somewhere necessary, and even make some mistakes accidentally. Ned's eyes narrowed. Sig confirmed once again that this man was not born to be cunning. His body couldn't even make the expression that a cunning person should have. My dear Lord Varys, who do you belong to? Who do you serve? Sir, is there any need to say more? I am a man who serves the country. I swear on everything I have. I serve the country, and what the country needs is peace. Varys seemed to be thirsty and wanted to moisten his mouth with lees. Sig didn't give him a chance and drank it all up. The octopus spider showed a resentful expression. Lord Ned, please give me a definite answer. What is your answer? I need you to guarantee that when the Queen Mother comes, she can hear what she wants to hear. Sig deliberately let go of Ned's soul and let him control his tongue for a short time. If I make that kind of promise, it is tantamount to selling my soul. My life is not enough to compensate for my soul. Ned's words did not exceed Sig's expectations. In fact, his answer was just like Ned's personality, smelly and hard, always occupying the moral high ground. Unlike hypocrites, guys like Ned not only hurt others, but also themselves. What a pity. Viserys, who had been squatting, stood up. I understand what you mean, but I still want to ask you. His expression was so sentimental. Where is your lovely daughter? That little person, delicate as if from a fairy tale, will definitely become a beautiful little girl that her father is proud of. Isn't her life worth it, and not as precious as your soul? Ned felt a chill, and Sigurd watched coldly on the side. My daughter, my lord, you don't think the Queen Mother will forget your innocent daughter, do you? The expression of the octopus spider became hideous at the right time, reminding Ned of the horror of reality. Don't. Ned roared hoarsely, my lord, I beg you, I don't care what happens to me, but Sansa is innocent, please don't involve her. Sigurd spit in Ned's heart. This guy is looking for someone to stab his soft spot. Stupid to hurt people. It's a pity that this guy can live to this age. This world is indeed abnormal. Prince Rhaegar's daughter, Her Highness Rhaenys, is also a child, a truly lovable little darling. She has a kitten named after a black dragon. Viserys shook his head, as if he had shouldered all the sorrow in the world. In Sig's opinion, the octopus spider did this just to draw out the fear and sadness in Ned. The Archbishop said that everyone is guilty, so everyone will suffer. At this moment, Viserys' eyes were serious. Please tell me why in the game of power among princes and nobles, innocent people always suffer the most. This was what Sig wanted to hear, and what he wanted to tell Ned, but Viserys said it for him. The next person to visit you may bring bread and forget-me-not milk, or it may be Sansa's poor little head. The octopus spider put down all his disguises. His face was hideous and terrifying. Which one you want? The decision is in your hands. Chapter 106 Sig and Ned. 1. After the octopus spider left, the cell returned to darkness. Sig returned the body to Ned, and he hid in the corner of Ned's consciousness, watching the former Lord of Winterfell go crazy in the cell. After a while, Ned dragged his injured leg, exhausted his limited physical strength, and fell into the straw pile full of urine smell. Tired. Planning to rest. But I'm still here. These few words, understated and extremely provocative, made Ned crazy. Another round of mania and roaring. Sig wisely controlled Ned's legs and feet, preventing him from making the injury of his left foot worse. You devil, if you dare, let's face each other, Ned roared. I'm in the Dothraki grasslands, tracking the Nukels, and I don't have time to run to the cell and mold with you. The facts were not far from his response. The action of leading the mercenaries to chase the new khalasar was not smooth. On the first day of the battle, he defeated the vanguard led by Jaqaqil himself with his strong personal combat power. Sig killed and wounded 3 blood guards, and then Jaqaqil began to lead the entire khalasar to flee. Even for Sig, it would be extremely difficult to lead people to catch up with the locals who were determined to escape in the Dothraki Sea. Are you a wizard? Working for the remnants? Ned finally calmed down. I'm not a wizard. Besides, as a traitor, what qualifications do you have to call others remnants? As long as your family and subordinates are still alive in this world, the title of remnants belongs to them. Sig said sternly in his mind. Yes. Ned sat up in frustration, his shoulders shrugged. It's all my fault, I have no right to blame others. After the tossing just now, you should be more sober. Remember Robert mentioned me. Ned raised his head suddenly. It was dark all around, and Sig only existed in Ned's mind. He could still feel Ned's fear and imagine his expression. You guessed right, respected Lord of Winterfell, Lord Eddard Stark, I am the real mastermind behind all this. It was me who allowed Violet to approach you, it was me who saved Robert, it was me who made Joffrey change, and it was me who helped the little demon escape his fate in the mountains of the moon. In fact, I did a lot of things to slowly change the world. So, you're a wizard who intends to subvert the 7 kingdoms with conspiracy. Ned's tone began to calm down. He felt the change in Ned's mood, his fear was shrinking, and his anger was increasing. So that's how it is. As long as it involves so-called responsibility and honor, you will become bold and fearless of life and death. Sigurd said, but my good Duke, do you really understand what I am? Why do you conclude that I will be detrimental to the 7 kingdoms? You are the source of all evil, it is you who instigated trouble, it was me who instigated trouble and made you fail. It was me who made the Queen commit adultery with regicide, it was me who killed Robert, it was me who disrupted the situation, it was me who forced Renly to leave you, and it was me who made Littlefinger rebel, so the fault is not with you, but with this strange mysterious person like me. You are still the perfect knight. Everything is the fault of the mysterious person you don't understand. He paused deliberately to let Ned think for himself. And no, I'm not saying I didn't do anything wrong, you cunning bastard, I don't think you're stubborn, you're a thief. Once you find a possibility of acquitting yourself, you put all the blame on others, so you get away with it, and the blame is borne by others. You don't even need to know that person, just based on what you say, the other person is guilty of a heinous crime, and you have just made a small mistake, right? Upright Lord Stark. Sig paused again to let him think. And Ned remained silent. Let me tell you what happened. Sig changed to an accusatory tone. He felt that this would make the bastard in front of him understand that he was the one who was really wrong, not anyone else. The queen committed adultery with her brother, and the children born were pretending to be a prince and princess. Prime Minister Oberyn and Lord Stannis discovered the clues. While they were looking for evidence, Prime Minister Oberyn died suddenly and Lord Stannis fled back to Dragonstone. Robert, who was not good at governing the country and was not suitable to be king, had to travel thousands of miles to find his brothers, because the trust between them was far greater than Robert's trust in the ministers of the kingdom. In Winterfell, your son, the little brat who liked to climb the wall, discovered something. If I guessed correctly, he discovered the queen's secret. He was pushed off the tower. At this time, my subordinate, the poor armless girl Violet, almost sacrificed her life to save little Bran. Please note that this is what you think is my conspiracy. Violet is part of the conspiracy. She should not save people, and should let little Bran die. Is that right? The upright and unastute Ned. He spat in the area of consciousness. Although there was no saliva, the feeling and action could still be clearly presented in Ned's mind. Then you followed the king to King's Landing. On the way, Robert's beloved adopted son Joffrey became violent and tried to hurt a poor butcher's apprentice, but was stopped by Violet. By the way, this time you can say that everything was my conspiracy. After all, bringing Joffrey, the fake prince, back to reality and training him essentially strengthened the Lannisters' control over the kingship. Here he stopped again, waiting for Ned's response. Ned still said nothing. A lot of things happened afterwards. When you arrived at King's Landing, you found that the royal family was a mess. Robert was in debt, and the biggest creditor was the Lannisters. If the royal family could go bankrupt, Robert would have gone bankrupt long ago. Perhaps even mortgaging the throne to the Lannisters would not have been enough to pay off his debts. During this period, there was another assassination in Winterfell. Maybe it was me who did it. Your wife was almost killed. Someone used Tyrion's dagger to stab little Bran, so your wise wife determined that Tyrion was the murderer and came all the way to King's Landing to meet you. By the way, Sir Rodriguez, whom she brought with her, was too old to serve as a guard. I took the trouble to help her arrange the entire trip, but she only paid a few gold dragons as compensation. What a stingy woman. You have had contact with Catelyn? Ned asked weakly, no longer domineering. Of course, that's why you can put the blame on me. Sig was very sarcastic. Such an obvious way of framing someone. A cunning guy like the little devil was stupid enough to hire someone with his own dagger, and you two big men who claim to be smart and upright actually believed it. I don't believe it. I told Kate that there must be evidence. Ned responded with some hesitation. Haha, you see, I said you were cunning. You didn't judge such an obvious trap at the first time, and you just used evidence as an excuse to get rid of your wife. As a result, your wife illegally arrested Tyrone, and all the violence started from that time. And what did you do? You didn't let the situation calm down, and you didn't try to find out the problem behind it. Instead, you took everything on yourself without thinking, which resulted in the king's lair attacking your guards and killing your loyal subordinates. As a result, your wife took Tyrone all the way east and had a fight in the area. As a result, Tyrone escaped, but the war did not disappear. The Lannisters began to gather an army, and Riverrun was helplessly involved. No matter what the reason, the Lannisters should not attack the village protected by the king. Ned's hoarse voice sounded like both an excuse and an accusation. Speaking of the Lannisters attacking the village, this is already a precursor to war. Respected Duke, as Prime Minister, what did you do? The other side clearly ignored the royal flag, slaughtered and plundered at will, and their behavior was unforgivable, but you still sent a small team of knights, plus half of your guards, to ask for justice under the royal flag. Not to mention how tragic the fate of the poor troops you sent out was, your actions left the power around you empty. Isn't this an important reason for your final defeat in the massacre of your subordinates? In the field of consciousness, he pulled out Ned's consciousness and the two looked at each other. Ned turned his head away. For these undeniable practices, you want to put the blame on me. Is this really what an upright person should do? Sig's tone was stern. But you occupied my body and can cast strange and evil spells. Ned's defense seemed to make sense. There are many people who can use evil magic. In Ally, almost half of the city is made up of evil wizards. Why don't you sue them? What do you think I have done in the things I just said, except for Violet saving little Bran? Ned stopped talking. Sig felt that his frustration, regret and other emotions were getting stronger. His state made people reluctant to rebuke him. Here you go again. When you find that you can't deny it, you pretend to be pitiful and remorseful, as if you are the most pitiful person in the world. You hope that others will pity you, and don't want anyone to rebuke you. Lord Ned, you are such a disappointing guy. The northern warriors who followed you are so pitiful. If they knew that their master was such a cowardly and despicable person, would they go crazy in the kingdom of night? Enough. In the field of consciousness, Ned stood up. Although his face was still hesitant and regretful, he no longer weakly concealed, "This is all my fault. I am bastard." Isn't this what you want me to say? Chapter 107 Sig and Ned. 2. This time it was Sigurd's turn to be silent. He realized that Ned was smarter than he thought. "Please, my daughters, they are innocent." "Stop, Lord Ned, they are innocent, but they are also Starks. Since you, as their father, have failed, just like Robb had to lead his troops to the battlefield and the Stark guards had to fight bloody battles, they have enjoyed a life of luxury since childhood, and now they must pay the price." Sigurd's anger subsided a lot, and he didn't want to torture Ned anymore. "Sansa is with Myrcella, and her safety is in Joffrey's hands. I think you also know Joffrey's character and Myrcella's current condition. She will be fine. As for Arya, Violet went to find her and confirmed that she had escaped, but it is not yet certain where the little girl is and how she is doing." Ned let out a long sigh. "Lord Ned, maybe I shouldn't call you Lord in the future, because you will disappear into the darkness like Robert. Do you think I will cooperate with a wizard?" "Why do you think I am a wizard?" Sig asked interestingly. "Is it just because I can control your body and speak in your head? Why not gods or demons? Maybe it's the ancient gods you believe in." "Gods have never appeared in front of me," Ned said. "Besides, you give people the feeling that you are just a human being." Sig became excited. "Sure enough, I am still a human being. It has been so many years, you know. I can't tell how many years or centuries I have experienced. Different worlds and eras are different. Anyway, it has been countless years. I have forgotten my past self, and even why I have struggled to survive in so many different worlds. The only thing that supports me, as the origin of everything, is that I still know that I am a human being." He excitedly shook Ned in the field of consciousness. "Now you tell me that you are still like a human being. This is very important, really important. I am very pleased to make you so happy." Ned hesitated. "But what are you?" He sent a smiling signal to Ned. "It doesn't matter what I am. The key is that I am still a human being at heart." He decided to pause the discussion of whether to be human or not. "Lord Ned, we need your joining." "When you say we, do you mean?" Ned asked warily. "Myself, you can call me Sig, or Viserys Targaryen. Violet, a poor little girl, lost both arms on the battlefield, but she is simple and kind. Robert Baratheon, the former king of the Seven Kingdoms, is rough and righteous, and is the least suitable person in the world to work as a king. Joffrey Baratheon, a young man who dreams of becoming a perfect knight. Myrcella Baratheon, a princess who dreams of becoming a female knight like a sword dancer. And Daenerys Targaryen, whom you once tried hard to protect, but was feared by Robert and the ministers." And Ned was stunned for a long time before he regained consciousness. He looked like someone who had been indulging in something and was blinded by narrow-minded thinking, but suddenly broadened his horizons and saw the great galaxy. The shock, confusion and disbelief mixed in that consciousness, making Ned's thoughts a mess. Waking up from the chaos is like a drowning person finally sticking his head out of the water and greedily sucking in fresh air. "You, Lord Sig, if you have such power, what do you want to do? Start a war, rule the Seven Kingdoms like a conqueror, or have other purposes?" Sig nodded. Ned had a keen sense of perception. He was gradually approaching the truth without enough intelligence. "This is difficult to describe. I will directly copy a part of my memory to you, maybe you can have a clearer understanding of my purpose," Sig said solemnly. Ned realized something. "I'm afraid your memory is not that easy to accept. Your lifespan is much longer than that of an ordinary person, which is a great burden on your brain, plus those things that are difficult to understand. Besides the greater burden, were there any other consequences?" Ned asked tentatively. "You will die, or go crazy, or like Hotter." Ned was no longer as surprised as before. "You can peek into my thoughts." "No, I look at the memory of the world. Even for me, the memory of the world is still huge, and I will not use it if it is not necessary. It's just that I care more about Winterfell, so I took some from the memory of the world to look at it." Sig slowed down. He knew that Ned needed time to digest. Ned seemed to be hesitant, and finally his expression became resolute. "Well, I have nothing else to do anyway. If I die, it will be one less hostage for Lannister. The two people's consciousness looked at each other in their minds and nodded. God bless me. Sig selectively input his memories, experiences and some of his views into Ned's consciousness. Ned fell straight to the ground as if he was electrocuted. His consciousness was in chaos. Sig patiently swam in Ned's fragmented consciousness. He saw many familiar scenes. The world where Violet Evergreen was still the auto-memoir doll. In order to help her get out of the haze, one kind-hearted and beautiful person after another appeared and disappeared around her like a dream. Huang is the name of a wizard, with a simple face and a lonely expression, as if he had experienced all the sufferings in the world. The boy with glasses, who looks ordinary, has the ability to destroy a building with a paper cutter. Because he can't see all depths. Scarlet, like a burning hell, appeared on Mars, which was not long after human colonization. With only a little knowledge and endless ambition, humans opened the mysterious time and space gate found in the depths of Mars. Countless monsters swarmed out. Even human civilization with interplanetary capabilities could not resist the invasion of these evil creatures. He drifted in Ned's consciousness and saw a more bizarre world, a distant and huge interstellar empire and an equally huge and complex interstellar republic, just like the tribes of the Stone Age, constantly fighting each other, leaving tens of billions of people facing endless wars and suffering. Sig finally found Ned, who was confused by the dreams of different worlds, and pulled him out of his trance. Tears were left on Ned's long face, the kind of grief, helplessness, frustration and anger hidden behind. Sig understood very well, because these were not Ned's emotions, but his own. His past emotions were all preserved in his memory. When Ned saw his memory, he also felt his emotions. Ned returned, and the consciousness gradually returned to normal. Sigurd used his power to create a dream of pastoral, stone house and warm home for Ned. Ned stood alone in the simple kitchen of the stone house, looking out the window, where Catelyn and his children were playing. The beautiful hostess, with a large basket in her hand, covered with food and striped floral cloth, the children were jumping around her happily, and they seemed to be heading to a nearby grassy slope for a picnic. Ned, hurry up, we're waiting for you. Catelyn called him in a crisp voice. She looked more than 10 years younger. Dad, you're too slow. Rob echoed on the side. Uncle, don't be stunned. If you don't come, we'll set off. Jon Snow said so. Why, Uncle? Sigurd seemed to have glimpsed some secrets. Arya, it's you again, stop it now. Sansa was furious and chased the little girl like a monkey everywhere. The beautiful hair ornament on her head was replaced by a bird's nest of dry grass. Little Bran Meta was on the grassy slope, chasing Rickon who was running with the direwolves. Everything seemed peaceful and quiet. Ned watched it all quietly. Tears streamed down his face. Sig stood shoulder to shoulder with him and patted his shoulder. What a beautiful dream, reality is so cruel. Ned turned his head and looked at him. If he was still a little choked up, if the interference of the guards is eliminated, will life be so beautiful? He shook his head. Never, Ned, never, but as long as the guards still control the fate of mankind, what happened to you will repeat forever. The tears on his face stopped, and Ned's expression became serious. The beautiful scenery outside the window, the laughter of his family in the warm stone house disappeared. They returned to the great realm of consciousness. There was silence all around. Ned took a long breath, as if to vent all the anger in his chest. For a better life, a better world, I join you. Chapter 108 The Return of the Little Devil. 5. Sir Adam reports that the Stark army is heading south. Theon said as he put the meat slices into the wooden plate. The tender and juicy pork, with a little bit of burnt skin on it, gave off a faint aroma. Lord Frey's troops have joined them. He frowned. Facing the delicious food on the wooden plate, he could still be so sad. Obviously, the news was frustrating. At this moment, the army is only a day's journey away from us. Bronn looked at Tywin's wooden plate with greedy eyes. He vaguely remembered that during the meeting yesterday, his opinion was that the Frey army was not a concern. Father. Every time I heard the little devil call his father, I felt itchy. The father and son were so distant, and their relationship could be imagined. I'm just about to start eating. Tyrion also prepared a wooden plate. The meat slices on the plate were plump and juicy. Bronn thought that the little devil was better at eating than his father, and the meat slices he chose looked more tempting. Tyrion, don't be so embarrassed. If it was your brother, the first thing you would think of upon hearing the enemy's movement would be to go into battle and kill the enemy to gain military merit. Lord Tywin looked displeased. I'd rather deal with a pig. The little devil's face did not change at all, and it was very appropriate to describe it as motionless. Robb Stark is not that tender, let alone that fragrant. Bronn stared at the plate in his hand and couldn't help swallowing his saliva. Earl Lafford, the baggage officer at the army, took the opportunity to move forward. I hope that group of barbarians are not like you, and pity your excellent equipment. My lord, I dare to guarantee you that the barbarians can use one sword to get the effect of two swords. Bronn still remembered that when he received the military order and took people to collect equipment from Lefford, the other party's expression was even more heartbroken than handing over his own daughter. Lefford glared at the little demon angrily. Today I met a big hairy man who insisted on having two battle axes. The Earl was like a stingy peddler, with a sharp face, that is a fine product made of heavy black steel, with two moon blades. He is the strongest warrior in the Moon Mountains. He can hold two heavy axes in both hands as easily as I can hold a fork in both hands. The little demon seemed to be in no hurry to eat the slices of meat on the wooden plate, waiting for the servants to continue cutting the smoking roast pork. The damn little man must be planning to stack the roast meat and pour special sauce on it. Bronn wanted to go up and grab the meat slices that were cooling on the wooden plate. But his own wooden axe is still hanging behind his back. The Earl looked like someone had taken out his lifeblood, gritting his teeth. Shogga meant that he must keep a spare one. The little demon sprinkled salt and pepper on the stacked meat slices. The atmosphere at the table was a bit strange. Although everyone was tie-dyeing up the wooden plates and putting meat slices on them, no one moved the forks. Bronn instinctively sensed something was wrong. It seemed that everyone's eyes were focused on the little demon. When did Lord Tywin's dwarf son become so respected by everyone? We have a great idea. Sir Kevin leaned forward. When the battle begins, you and your barbarians will be the glorious vanguard. Did Sir Kevin really have such an idea? Bronn thought that this should be what Lord Tywin meant. Poor little demon, the plump meat was still dripping with soup, and his fork couldn't even be put into his mouth. Vanguard. He repeated stupidly, Father, you don't suddenly have enough respect for my ability. The little demon didn't get a response. Bronn had a bad feeling. They are a group of mighty warriors. Sir Kevin said exaggeratedly. Mighty. The poor little demon could only repeat Kevin's words like a crow. Lord Tywin's eyes were sharp and his expression was serious. He seemed to be very serious about every word the knight said. Powerful. The little demon said angrily, let me tell you how powerful they are. Yesterday, the idiot from the Moon People stabbed a man from the Stone Crows to death for a sausage. Today, when we were camping, 3 guys from the Stone Crows caught the murderer and cut his throat to avenge their companions. Bronn recalled everything that happened in the morning. He had tried his best to stop Shogga from chopping up that dead man and feeding him to the crows. But Ulf was still there, demanding compensation. Of course, the bastard from the Stone Fangs would not agree. An army without discipline represents a bastard commander. Lord Tywin said coldly. You mean, as long as you're a little taller, you can scare them and they dare not mess around, right, sir? The little demon said unhappily. Tywin didn't even look at his son, and turned to Sir Kevin. If Tyrion can't control the barbarians, he is obviously not suitable for the position of the vanguard. We should let him stay behind and be responsible for the baggage. This was the first time Bronn saw the little demon blushing with anger. Father, don't worry about me. He gnashed his teeth and made a sound. If you really have no place to put me, let me command the vanguard. Tywin's expression was a combination of contempt, disdain and disdain. He looked Tyrion up and down. No, I won't let you command. You must obey the command of Sir Gregor. The little devil angrily spat out the pork that had just entered his mouth. My lord, I'm not hungry at all. He said clumsily and jumped off the bench. Everyone enjoys it slowly. I'll take my leave first. After that, he pulled Bronn, who was drooling down his chin, out of the tent. There was laughter. Bronn prayed to the gods that maybe some adults would be choked to death by pork. Night fell and the sky turned deep purple. The camp was located between the King's Road and the Green Fork River. The two of them moved forward silently among the many people and trees. There were campfires everywhere and tents were connected, as if they had come to another world. The smell of sausages and garlic floated between the tents, and the two people's stomachs made a sound one after another. Not far away, a drunken knight was chasing and flirting with a camp prostitute. At the edge of the woods, 2 spearmen were practicing thrusts under the campfire. Looking at the lonely figure of the little devil, he suddenly felt that he was not following the real Lannister. There were as many as 20,000 elite troops around, but no one would care about the dwarfs. In silence, Shogga's harsh and unpleasant laughter pierced the night and came over. The two followed the sound. The Stone Crows were roasting a whole cow. Tyrion rejected Khan's proposal to eat meat together, and Bronn breathed a sigh of relief. Just looking at the bloody cow carcass, people lost their appetite. The two continued to move forward. The Black Ears and the Stone Crows ate together, but the Stone Crows always stayed away from the Moon People. The Burning People were always lonely, and their campfires were lonely outside the main tribe. The two walked for a long time before they found the tent they had finally got from Lefford. The tent was located between the camps of the 4 tribes, not biased. The little devil was really frustrated and returned to the tent without saying a word. Although Bronn was not a model captain of the guards, he thought that the dejected little devil was not a good sign and that he had to change this state. He left alone and ran to the Green Fork River to search. Soon he saw fish swimming in the water. He was very good at fishing, which was a necessary skill to avoid going hungry during long journeys in the wild. He took out a small cloth bag, put his fingers into it, and pinched a little powder with a spicy smell. Bronn sprinkled the powder on the river bank near the fish, holding the dagger in his hand and waiting patiently. Soon, the lake water was turning in the night. His dagger was as fast as lightning, and he caught the fat trout in just 5 short strokes. He pierced the fish's gills and strung 2 big fish with leather ropes. He was ready to return to the tent to reward the noble Lord Tyrion and tell him that it was not suitable to be gloomy and worried about national affairs all day. There was a teasing sound from the tent next to him. The woman's voice was crisp and pleasant, unlike other camp skills. With the thought in mind, he strode to the outside of the tent, used his scabbard to pry open the tent, and saw a drunk man and a slattered black-haired girl. "Who are you?" "Close the tent." The man opened his drunken eyes and shouted. Bronn looked up and down at the girl. She had a pair of beautiful eyes like a doe, black hair, and looked no more than 18 years old. "Come with me, there is a lord who needs your comfort." "Asshole, I fell in love with her first." The drunk stood up with a curse, and it seemed that he had a hard time just to maintain his balance. Looking around, there were servants and guards outside the tent. It was estimated that this man was a knight. But at this time, the servants were drunk and no one could protect the noble knight. Bronn approached him. "My lord, I must tell you how urgent the lord who needs this lady is." He put down the fish calmly and skillfully and sheathed his sword. "No lord can do this." The drunk shouted angrily. "Even Lord Tywin?" The drunk choked for a moment, as if considering what to do if it was really Lord Tywin. He looked Bronn up and down. "Just you, Lord Tywin won't even look at you." Bronn didn't let the drunk continue. The long sword was not unsheathed, but it was like an iron rod, firmly stabbing the drunk's neck. Even if Bronn held back, the feeling could not be described in words. The drunk turned over and fell with a pale face. He curled up in pain and couldn't make a sound. The girl jumped up in fear, like a frightened deer. Bronn reached out and caught her. "Miss, it's okay here. I need you to go over there to help my lord relieve his worries." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109: The Return of the Little Devil. 6. Bronn felt like a saint. He never thought that one day he would look for a woman for someone who was not his son. He walked in front with the trout, and the girl followed behind. As a camp prostitute, the girl really attracted attention, but it was also true that compared with those women with strange looks, this beauty was like a gift from God. Before she took a few steps, someone began to make moves on her. At first, it was some soldiers, at most servants, and later on, there were people who came on behalf of knights and even on behalf of lords. Those who wanted to rot were dealt with by Bronn, and those who threatened with status, he fought back with the name of Lannister. While cursing the beauty was a disaster, Bronn finally returned to the tent with the fish and the girl. The little devil was arguing with his new servant, and the two stared at each other. The poor servant was unfortunate. His last name was Payne, and it was said that he was a distant relative of the king's former enforcer, Ilan Payne. Bronn had no idea about the heroes of the kingdom. In his mind, as long as he knew who the current king was, he would be qualified. However, judging from the situation of this poor boy named Podrick Payne, it can be inferred that the position of the Lord's judge is not a popular one. Podrick was taciturn and couldn't thought for a long time. The little devil asked him to stick out his tongue, and the squire did so. "You do have a tongue," the dwarf said solemnly. "Since you have the thing, you must learn to use it one day." Bronn didn't have time to watch the little devil vent his anger on the squire. He shook the trout at Tyrion and let the girl approach the dwarf by herself. "As you can see, the lord I serve as him. Our respected Tyrion Lannister has just suffered a mental trauma and needs comfort." Bronn built a campfire and set up a grill for grilling fish. The girl stepped forward gracefully and looked down at the little devil. "My lord, I am glad to meet you. As you can see, I also have a tongue, and it works very well." The girl was not shy and didn't seem to care about the little devil's disability, at least on the surface. The dwarf tilted his head. "I'm Tyrion Lannister. People call me Little Devil," he responded skillfully. "My mother named me Shay, and people often call me that." The girl said her name in a smart little devil tone. The little devil raised his mouth, seeming very satisfied. "Please share dinner with me, Shay." After that, he pulled the girl to sit down and lit a candle. Bronn shook his head and cursed the extravagance in his heart. He enviously watched the little devil sitting opposite the girl, and the two seemed to be chatting happily. As expected, the nobles are different from ordinary people. Their atmosphere seems to be very good. One day, I must ask the dwarf for advice on how to please women with both hands. The grilled fish is boring. Bronn decided to observe and learn from the side first, just like he often did, but the object of observation is usually the competition between warriors, and today's goal is very different. Tyrion held the candle and observed the girl carefully, as if he was appreciating a work of art. Bronn is very confident in his vision and believes that the dwarf cannot refuse. She had doe-like eyes, a slanted figure, and although not graceful, her curves were very smooth. The most amazing thing was her demeanor, sometimes shy, sometimes arrogant, and sometimes even revealing evil. After careful observation, Bronn began to regret it. He found that he should have kept this for himself. "My lord, do you want me to take off my clothes?" the girl asked with a provocative look. "Wait a minute, my good girl, are you a virgin?" "My lord, if you like, think so." She pretended to be solemn, but did not hide the slight sarcasm behind her expression. This was a perfect provocation, which could arouse the confrontation of men without breaking the glass hearts of some people. "Good boy, I need to know the truth." The little devil pretended to be solemn. Bronn thought he didn't care at all. "Really?" The beautiful eyes turned again and again. "You have to pay double the price." The two were simply a perfect match, Bronn meant in terms of wisdom. He was somewhat fortunate that he didn't keep the girl, otherwise he would not know that he had been cheated of all his money. "I am a Lannister. Gold dragons are just some boring metal to me." The little devil looked into the girl's eyes. "I am very generous, more generous than you can imagine. But I want more than just the weight of your daily work." He was very serious, as if he was explaining something important that affected the rise and fall of a country. "I want you to live with me, pour me wine, chat with me, and massage my sore feet every day, and no matter how long I need you, maybe a few days, maybe a few years, you can only follow me." The two seemed to have reached a tacit understanding. The little devil gave Bronn a wink and took Shay into the tent, leaving Bronn to grill fish and curse. After eating his own trout and leaving some for the little devil and Shay, Bronn sighed that he was becoming a better person. He left the trout and sharpened his sword on the other side of the campfire. It's not that his sword is not sharp enough, this is his homework every night. Under the feral light, the blade reflected the orange-red flash, and he would feel peaceful. Even if he was going to die tomorrow, it was worth it to spend a peaceful night. Perhaps it was this mentality that made him walk through the brink of life and death repeatedly. "Where did you find her?" the little devil asked while peeing under the tree. "I stole it from a knight. The guy didn't want to, so I knocked him down. Then I knocked down many people along the way, and used your name to scare more knights, including a lord." His state of mind was as smooth as a mirror. What he had just done was reflected in his state of mind without any distortion. He felt that it was not bad. The name of Lannister was really powerful to use. "That's great." The little devil's tone was not very excited. "It's a good idea to find someone to comfort me, but can you please not help me make so many enemies? Do you think I've lived too long? There are too many dogs and little meat, and even less good meat." Bronn said unhappily, "If you want to find an old and toothless one, I don't mind helping you send Shay away." The dwarf twisted and turned and took a lot of effort to sit down next to him. "If you dare to say this to other Lannisters except me, you'll be sent to mine. It's because it's you and not your father that I followed." Bronn seemed to remember something. "By the way, there's also a garlic nose. Do you want to switch?" "No, I won't take all the good things for myself, you keep them for yourself." The little devil stretched. "Your fish grilling skills are great. By the way, did you happen to notice the names of those guys who were beaten? I don't want to have them behind me during the battle." Bronn put away the whetstone and spun the sword in his hand like an acrobat. "I will be by your side in the battle to ensure the maximum reward." "I feel relieved to hear such a promise." The little devil grinned ugly. "Keep me alive on the battlefield, and there will be a handsome reward." His tone and expression were serious. Bronn fiddled with his sword like an extension of his arm. "Who would want to kill you? Knights value honor, and killing you won't bring honor. I bet my own father is one of the people who want to kill me, and we're the vanguard." What a smart move. Bronn understood what he meant, but he must not let the little devil lose confidence tonight. He had seen countless more capable, tall and strong warriors who died accidentally in small conflicts just because of their bad moods. The dwarf holds a big shield, and the archers in the north will go crazy. "You are such a good coach who was delayed by the mercenary industry. You actually made me so excited in this situation." The little devil smiled bitterly. "I must be crazy." The deafening sound of the trumpet was accompanied by the tremor of the earth. Bronn threw off the blanket and jumped up. In order to prepare for the war, he didn't take off his armor at all at night. The sound of the horn resounded through the sky. Damn, it was still night. The assembly order was wild and urgent, constantly urging people to act. There were shouts and knives, the clash of spears and the neighing of horses. If there had been any more sounds of fighting, Bronn would have ridden away immediately. Fortunately, there was no fighting. He remembered his duty and ran to the temporary stable. The pale night mist floated around, and people and horses shivered and ate in the chill of dawn. People were busy preparing saddles, reloading supplies onto wagons, and extinguishing campfires. The horn sounded again, urging the knights to mount their horses and spurring the infantry to arm and form a team. Chapter 110 Chaotic Battlefield 1. Sigurd entered the body of the servant when a little devil kicked him. He remained calm and did not intend to intervene too much. The little devil was too smart, so smart that even the slightest unreasonableness would make him suspicious. He wanted the little devil to join too much, and could not bear such a character to die prematurely. In his mind, the little devil's future position had already been decided. He was the best candidate for the king's hand, no one else. "Bring my armor, bastard," Tyrion said anxiously. "Hurry up, I don't want to fight the enemy in my pajamas." With the sound of horse hooves, Bronn, fully armed, rode out of the morning mist on his war horse. "What's wrong?" the little devil asked. Stark's little devil got ahead. Bronn said. He stopped his warhorse, first looked around, as if he was on guard against the northern army that could rush out of the morning mist at any time. They took advantage of the night and went south along the tidy road. They are less than a mile to the north, and the whole army is in battle formation. Woo-woo, the horn sounded long, continuing to whip the panicked troops in the camp. "Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up," as if someone was chasing behind, shouting at the soldiers to speed up. Sig was both excited and nostalgic. He was born to be on the battlefield, and he traveled in different worlds. Only the battlefield made him feel alive. Although this sense of reality was not complete, since he was strong enough to fight the demon, it was no longer possible to feel the line between life and death. However, in the body of the little devil, he had the same sense as the dwarf, and he was excited again. Let the natives gather and prepare to go. The little devil used Bronn as a herald and retreated into the tent. It seemed that the isolated noise and the roar of the horses and men could give him a sense of security. Without Sig's intervention, the little devil did not slack off. This person is so smart that he always knows what to do and when. It is rare to see a person like the little devil. "Where are my clothes?" Tyrion shouted at Shay. "That one? No, not the damn leather coat. And the boots? Yes, bring the boots." When he was dressed, the servants lined up the armor and waited on a side. The armor was very inconspicuous. It was not the one that Tyrion had tailored for him, which was carefully crafted to fit his deformed body. Unfortunately, that armor was now an armor rock. This set of armor was obtained from the miserly Earl Efford, who used threats, inducements, and all kinds of methods. The Earl originally insisted that dwarves had no use for armor. In the end, the stingy old man found him a mail and a headgear with shaking hands, as well as a throat guard, knee pads, gloves, and pointed steel boots from a dead knight. The protective gear of unknown brands, some with decorations, some with family emblems, were not a complete set at all, and did not fit him. The little devil's breastplate did not fit him. It was like putting an iron barrel in his chest. Compared with his deformed body, his huge head was even more difficult to solve. In order to find a suitable helmet, even Lefford was troubled. In the end, a bucket-shaped helmet with a 1-foot-long triangular spike on the top was prepared for Tyrion. War isn't fair. Nobles and powerful people can always find the best equipment and armor. For example, little devil, although he is a dwarf, no one on the battlefield will be worse off than him. Even those camp prostitutes are more suitable for soldiers than him. However, through the protection of heavy armor that looks inconspicuous but comprehensive, little devil has the capital to fight against top-heavy cavalry. It can be said that he stands in the echelon of the few elites on the battlefield, leaving behind most militia, infantry and even squire cavalry, and has a better chance of surviving in the battle. Shay and Pod buckled him with buckles and laces. "When I die, remember to cry for me." Tyrion seemed to be advising his newlywed wife. "People are dead, what can you know?" Shay is an outlier who likes to tell the truth. "I just know." Little devil was very excited and spoke less than usual. Sigurd knew the dwarf state better. He was afraid and excited, perhaps because he had realized a dream that he could never expect. He could fight like a knight. "I believe you will." Shay gave him a light kiss and considerately put on the great helmet for him. Pod connected the throat guard to the helmet. He had a short sword and a dagger hanging on his waist, which felt like a piece of iron. The groom nervously led the warhorse for him, a tall brown warhorse with thick armor and protection at the base of the horse's legs. Heavy armored cavalry, the murderous aura of the cold weapon era. Sig silently expected the scene of blood and flesh flying everywhere. Tyrion was like a moving iron barrel, and could only rely on Pod's help to get on the horse. Then Pod handed him a large shield with steel edges and picked up a double-edged battle axe. "My lord, you are so majestic and magnificent." The girl blinked and said, "A dwarf wearing funny armor." Tyrion said sourly. Sig didn't think so. As long as he was a qualified warrior, he would not underestimate a heavy cavalry on the battlefield. The little devil was indeed a little funny, but it would be a big mistake to think that he had no lethality. This battle will test the vision of the Northern Knights. If anyone underestimates this unprepossessing tin can, reality will be cruel to that person. Tyrion turned to Podrick, like a real knight. "If the battle is not going well, escort this lady away immediately." He raised his battle axe and saluted his lady like a real knight. At this moment, the little devil wished he was a real knight. Tall and mighty, he said goodbye to his tender wife. Unfortunately, he was not a knight, and Shay did not have a tender heart. The warhorse galloped, but the little devil began to have a stomach shock. This was a natural reaction to being too nervous. As long as he was not so fragile that he would fall off the horse, Sig would not intervene. The morning sun rose from the east, like a red cloak, gradually fluttering in the sky. There were stars hanging in the deep purple sky in the west. Tyrion was moved by the beautiful scenery and mourned for the fate he was about to face. Through his feelings, Sig once again experienced the kind of helpless sadness when he was still human. This feeling is not bad, at least it is an enjoyment that can only be enjoyed by the living, he thought. In the direction of the horizon, the sound of the military trumpet was low and mournful, as if the vengeful spirits of the kingdom of night were venting their jealousy of the living. Tyrion's barbarian troops had completed their assembly. They climbed onto the skinny warhorses, cursing loudly and mocking each other. Some seemed to be still drunk and staggering on their horses. The little devil gritted his teeth and deliberately ignored the loose state of the barbarians. He warned himself that the barbarians were extremely fierce and bloodthirsty. After self-hypnosis, the tension was relieved. Sig applauded in his consciousness. He really liked this dwarf more and more. The barbarian troops set out, and the morning light was evaporating the fog left by the night. The dew on the grass on the way forward reflected the sunset. The team's formation was simple and primitive. The clan leaders followed the little devil, and the ordinary clan soldiers followed their leaders. Such a formation was both primitive and fragile. As long as one leader was lost, Tyrion would lose a quarter of his troops. But what would he do if he were in Tyrion's position? The red glow of the morning light dyed everything into a dreamy color. The Lannister troops slowly deployed their formations like blooming flowers of steel. The center was commanded by Sir Kevin, whose position was marked by the roaring lion flag on the King's Road. He led most of the infantry, with neatly lined spearmen in the middle, each with a solemn expression. On both sides were archers, who adjusted their bowstrings while calmly observing the enemy's situation, with their cold arrows reflecting the sunlight. The infantry, wearing heavy armor and equipped with swords, spears and battle axes, were behind the archers and spearmen. They were the reserve forces of the infantry formation, ready to be deployed wherever they were needed. Sir Kevin and the nobles, knights and lords of the center were waiting on one side of the center under the escort of 300 heavy cavalry. Their role was to observe and command, and the heavy cavalry could play a role in turning the tide when necessary. The right wing of the army, although it was not very clear from Tyrion's perspective, was the main force of the army. It was composed entirely of various types of cavalry, and it gathered most of the knights of the army. Lord Tywin appointed his favorite general, Sir Adam Marbrand, as the commander-in-chief of the right wing. Tyrion was very scared, and he forced himself to continue observing the situation. Sib admired him for this, especially for the rookie who was on the battlefield for the first time. Being able to do this showed that the little devil was not only extremely intelligent, but also had the talent to command the army. I really don't know why the gods put a dwarf's body under such a talented mind. Chapter 111 Chaotic Battlefield 2. Looking back at the hill where Tywin Lannister was stationed, it was the rear of the army and the location of the general reserve. A total of 5,000 troops, half cavalry and half infantry, were gathered there. Tyrion had never fought with his father, but he knew that his father was always with the reserve on the battlefield, looking at the situation from a high place, and putting the general reserve into the battle depending on the situation. In Sig's critical eyes, Tywin's approach was also remarkable. Compared with blindly charging forward bravely, Tywin not only ensured his own safety, so as to prevent the army from being overturned due to the loss of command, but also was able to command the overall situation and maximize the guarantee that the Lannister family would become the final winner. He himself had no opinion on Tywin Lannister. If this big man who could call the wind and rain before the Mad King was not too favored by the gods, he would not object to cooperating with Tywin. Unfortunately, in the current situation, Tywin could not cooperate with him. As the biggest beneficiary of the guard strategy, he was Sig's natural enemy. Tyrion stared at the hills in a trance. Under the banner of the roaring Golden Lion, his father was the most dazzling commander on the entire battlefield. Tywin Lannister's armor fully explained what is gorgeous and noble, and it is a combination of strength and beauty. His cloak is woven with countless golden threads, and even from a distance, you can feel the weight of the cloak. It almost completely covers the hind legs of Tywin's warhorse, making him look taller. In order to keep such a heavy cloak on Tywin's shoulders, a pair of golden lionesses lie on his shoulders as hooks. The husband of the lionesses, the lion with a majestic lion mane, raised his head on the great helmet of Lord Tywin. The 3 golden lions have ruby eyes, as if they can spit fire from their eyes at any time. The Duke's armor itself is practical fine steel plate armor, and the surface of the armor is decorated with red glaze. The hand guards, iron gloves, knee pads, etc. are all plated with gold and embellished with complex and profound decorative patterns. Even when the sun was shining brightly, Lord Tywin was still as bright as fire, which made people look forward to it. The rumbling of the war drums indicated that the army was going to march, not to march, but to set up battle formations and prepare for the confrontation. The war drums were not from the Lannister army, but from the Northern Stark army. The little devil was worried about Robb's wolf. There were rumors in the army that Robb brought his direwolf to the battlefield and was invincible. From his memory, Sieg saw his impression of the Great Wind. That was in Winterfell, when Robb released the direwolf to scare Tyrion for demonstration. Obviously armed to the teeth, the little devil still didn't want to see the direwolf Grey Wind of Winterfell. Sieg didn't worry that Grey Wind would harm the little devil, because he saw through Robb's plan. The shrewd Lord Tywin didn't know that he had been tricked. The little devil's thoughts were quickly replaced by doubts, which once again proved his value. Sieg evaluated the abilities of Tywin and little devil. Without considering the influence of experience, interpersonal relationships and appearance, little devil was obviously wiser than Tywin. The dwarf was worried about the sense of disharmony brought about by this conflict between the armies. Robb was not a fool. It was unwise to let the Northern army march all night and fight the Lannister army when they were exhausted. However, he could not think of any other reason to let Robb do this. This is the limit of human beings. Without sufficient intelligence and not being in the position of commander, little devil can only feel confused but does not understand the mechanism. If little devil sat in Tywin's position, would he fall into the trap so easily? Tyrion's thoughts were interrupted. The vanguard army was gathering on the left wing. The 3 black dogs on the yellow background represented the commander of the vanguard army, Sir Gregor. This man rode the tallest warhorse little devil had ever seen in his life. In times of crisis, you must follow that big one closely. Bronn said with a playful look on his face beside him. Why? Tyrion asked seriously. Although his appearance was still funny, he was too nervous to laugh. They are the best targets. All the archers on the battlefield can only see his tall figure. Bronn was trying to comfort the little devil. This mercenary's talent was not just that of a mercenary. Tyrion laughed, at least he was no longer as nervous as before. The mountain's equipment was not gorgeous. His armor was a thick dark gray plate armor. The surface of the armor was not modified or polished, only the traces of years of fighting. He was equipped with a 2-handed giant sword, but he used one hand to command his subordinates, as if it was just a light whip. Whoever takes a step back, I will tear him apart. The mountain roared. The little devil took your wildlings to guard the river on the left. I hope you don't drown. Tyrion didn't make much excuses. He realized that it was the leftmost wing of the entire army. If it was defended, the Stark army would not be able to encircle it from the left flank. It was the key point of the vanguard army. He suspected that such a layout was not the brain of the mountain. It was probably the idea of Sir Fenkai. Sigurd agreed with the little devil. Tyrion led the army, just like a child playing a war game. The morning mist on the Green Fork River had not yet dissipated, as if covering the river with a blanket. The dark green river water appeared and disappeared in the gaps of the mist, and the riverbed was full of mud. We defend here. The little devil pointed his battle axe at the river. First, don't let the river out of your sight. Second, don't let the enemy get between us and the river. Finally, chop off all the northerners who dare to invade and throw them into the river to feed the fish. To be honest, the little devil's preaching really sounded like that. Long live the half-men. Shagga roared first, and the people of other tribes followed. For a time, the morale on the riverbank was high and murderous. The little devil rode his warhorse to inspect the terrain, and Sigurd strengthened his vigilance, mainly to prevent the cold arrows of the Stark scouts. Tyrion is still too young. If he had fought in the battlefield a few more times, he would not dare to act like this, as if he was a large moving target swaggering on the battlefield. The sound of the war drums was getting closer, the little devil's heart was pounding, and cold sweat soaked his underwear. The roaring figure of the mountain were almost everywhere in the vanguard's position. This person came and went, pointing fingers, trying his best to make the vanguard's miscellaneous cavalry more presentable. The so-called miscellaneous, as the literal meaning, is not a regular army with different affiliations, but a group of rabble. There are few heavily armored knights here. Most of them are archers wearing leather armor, free riders with no discipline at all, peasants riding plows and holding pitchforks, and little brats who have not even grown beards and were captured from Lannisport. Of course, there are also a group of barbarians from the Moon Mountains brought by Tyrion. Ah, feed the crows. Bronn spat on the side. A group of poorly equipped and unprotected peasants, plus reckless rough men, want to use this army to defend the left wing. Tyrion had the same question. Seed was a little speechless. No matter how smart the little devil was and how he had a big picture, he still had expectations for his father. Although he was afraid and had seen enough evidence, he still didn't believe that his father actually wanted him to die on the battlefield. Boom boom boom, the sound of war drums. The spearheads of the Stark army were pointing at the vanguard army. The little devil's hands were twitching. Bronn drew his sword, and in just a heartbeat, the enemy had appeared, and a black crowd of people rushed over the hills towards them. The enemy hid behind the shield, not too fast, and took neat steps, making the ground tremble regularly. Gods! We're the only ones who can deal with so many people. The little devil couldn't help but scream. Most of the Stark army was infantry, and the officers were heavily armored knights. Together with their respective flag bearers, they led the soldiers behind them. The little devil could recognize the moose flag of the Hornwood family, the sunburst flag of the Karstark family, the battle-axe flag of Earl Severn, the iron fist of the Glover family, and even the twin towers of the Frey family. Damn it, my father emphasized that Lord Walder would not send troops at all. The little devil said bitterly. Sig hadn't felt so helpless for a long time. He couldn't remember when, and he must have been a small person who went with the flow, so he felt so helpless. It was right to experience this battle with the little devil. The white direwolf flags of the Stark family were flying everywhere. Tyrion couldn't help but look for Robb's location. Sig turned around and looked around, leaving the little devil's futile efforts. He was recalling his past battlefield experience, which might be used in a while to protect Tyrion, a rookie on the battlefield. The two armies blew their horns at the first clash. One side was long and passionate, the other side was unyielding and could not turn back. Tyrion could no longer control his nervousness, and he was sweating, had stomach shots, cramps in his hands, and waves of acid coming out of his stomach. The horns gradually stopped, and the northern army accelerated its speed for the final sprint. On both sides of the King's Road, archers sprayed arrows in an orderly manner under the orders of their officers. Chapter 112 Chaotic Battlefield 3. The Stark army's formation began to become chaotic. Even the heavy infantry who charged with shields could not maintain a tight formation. The Lannister army's arrows rained down on the heads of the northern army. Hundreds of arrows kept making hissing sounds. The northerners held up their shields to block. Even among the heavily armored infantry, many fell to the ground and wailed. Some poor guys were even nailed to the ground. The neat shots were soon replaced by mixed wailing and roaring. With the arrival of the second batch of charging teams, the wailing quickly died out. Most of the poor people who were shot were trampled to death by their companions. The battlefield is so terrifying. Death is as natural as breathing. It is different from the hell created by demons and the dead silence of the Kingdom of Night. This is a man-made hell, an act close to the origin of human beings. Some worlds call it the original sin of human beings, and some worlds severely criticize it. But no matter which world it is, as long as there are humans, everything that happens on the battlefield will be regarded as natural and listed with natural disasters. Soon the second wave of arrows was fired. On the ground in front of the battlement, the grass with arrow shafts grew densely. At intervals, black corpses lay there, and the human figures could no longer be recognized. The archers were preparing to release the third wave of arrows. The order to attack sounded, this time from the Lannister trumpet order. Toot, toot, rapid and sharp. The mountain swung its greatsword and roared out orders. Thousands of vanguards responded. Everyone waved their weapons and shouted in uneven voices. The little demon screamed and joined the noisy chorus. Riverbank. He shouted at the bandits when he started the charge, hold the riverbank. The charge began with a deafening sound, but it was far beyond Tyrion's expectations. Sig breathed a sigh of relief. The little demon rushed too slowly, and the bandits seemed unable to bear the slow speed and rushed forward one after another. First, Zira, with a sharp cry that made people want to cover their ears, led the black ears to rush out from beside him. Then, Shagger's two black heavy axes collided, and he led the stone crows to rush over. When Tyrion reacted, he was left in the smoke and dust, unable to see anything, and kept coughing. Sig took a lot of effort to hold back his laughter, and he was almost kicked out of the little demon's body. He finally rushed out of the smoke and dust and saw a group of Northern Army spearmen. They formed a half-moon formation, like a large steel porcupine with thorns on both sides. The tall enemy soldiers hid behind the wooden shields with sunburst emblems, ready for battle. The Mountain led his personal guards, heavy cavalry and dozens of light cavalry to rush up. Facing the dense forest of spears, most of the horses stopped sprinting at the last moment, and the knights flowed out to both sides along the spearmen's line. A few people who were too excited or didn't see the situation clearly were pierced by the spears, and their bodies fell to the ground with the broken spears. The Mountain stopped his mount in front of the spear formation, and the spiked spear tip scratched the neck of the warhorse. The huge warhorse roared and stood up. The iron hoof kicked fiercely. The violent warhorse jumped into the heart of the enemy formation and was pierced into a blood gourd by the iron spears from all directions. At this moment, the shield wall collapsed, and the northern warriors had no choice but to dodge the struggle of the dying beast. The warhorse fell to the ground, but the Mountain was unharmed. He used his greatsword with both hands and slashed wildly at the dense forest of spears. Shagga rushed in with the stone crows. Tyrion remembered that he was still a leader, and shouted, "The Burning Men and the Moon Men, follow me." Unfortunately, he couldn't live up to his leader's addiction this time, and the people of the two tribes had already rushed to the front. He had no choice but to urge his horse to run faster. Timeot's horse fell to the ground and was dead, but Timeot was looking for his opponent and didn't seem to be injured. A man from the Stone Crow tribe was pierced by a spear, and Khan hit his warhorse Yanti break the ribs of the Karstark spearman. A hail of arrows fell, and Tyrion cursed and tried to raise his shield. With a clanking sound, his heavy armor had helped him escape. The battlefield was chaotic and it was impossible to tell who shot the arrows. Anyway, the people of the Starks and Lannisters were equally covered in the killing range of the arrows. As other troops of the vanguard joined and attacked, the tight formation of the spearmen collapsed. The Northerners kept retreating. A reckless Northern spearman rushed towards Shagga and was hit in the chest by an axe. He was killed on the spot. The axe was stuck in the body. Shagga didn't have time to pull out the axe. He swung the black steel heavy axe with his other hand to split the shield of another person. Shagga just let the body hang on the axe and continued to move forward. As the warhorse bumped, the body finally fell. The long-haired giant collided with his two axes and roared continuously. Seeing the bloody battlefield, Sig had an irresistible urge to wield a sword and go to the battlefield himself. He hoped to go back to the past, when he was still an ordinary human who would be frightened. At this time, the little demon also rushed into the enemy group. The large-scale fighting seemed like a background, and the enemy in front of him was more deadly. The little demon swung his battle axe to block a spear. The soldier jumped back and tried to distance himself and stab again. The little demon did not give him a chance. The armored warhorse stepped on the poor northern soldier with one foot. The sound of bones and flesh breaking rang out, and the soldier didn't even have time to scream. Sig took advantage of the opportunity and gave an idea, which was mixed in the little demon's overly nervous mind so that he couldn't find it. He asked the little demon to find Bronn. Bronn was not far away from him. 3 enemy soldiers surrounded him. He cut off a spear that was thrusting at him and split another man's face with a sword. The little demon couldn't get close to his bodyguard. Snap! A trembling sound came from the wooden shield, and a flying spear pierced his shield. The imp forgot to approach Bronn and instead chased the spear thrower. The opponent raised his shield above his head, and Tyrion rode his horse around him, smashing the wooden shield with his battle axe, causing wood chips to fly everywhere. As a result, the opponent slipped and fell, and the shield covered his body, so he couldn't get off the horse. The battle axe couldn't reach the opponent either. This was the difficulty of having short legs, so the imp had to abandon the passion of fighting and look for another opponent. Sig realized that the imp had lost his usual vigilance because of the advantage of the heavy armored knight. In fact, it was no wonder that he had lived in the shadow of others all his life. Everyone was taller than him, stronger and more agile than him. He always had to look up to others. No matter what experienced so many years of frustration, he suddenly found that he had the power to defeat those tall and mighty normal people, and his self-confidence was bound to expand. But Sig knew very well that the god of death often hides in self-righteous confidence. There were too many people who could have survived the entire war, but because of lack or unexpected military merits, they lost their inner balance and died in the next battle. Poor man, who says there's nothing to hate? The little demon took advantage of the heavy cavalry to sneak attack an infantryman. The opponent's back and neck were cut open, and the broken bones flowed out with the spurting blood. The body fell on the spot. The only price Tyrion paid was the pain in his arm. He reined in his horse and took the opportunity to catch his breath. Sigurd used the same trick again, wanting him to return to Bronn, but unfortunately the little demon at this time seemed to believe that he had a talent for fighting on the battlefield and was seriously looking for the next prey. A soldier of the burning tribe lay on his horse and let the horse stroll. A short spear was stuck in his back and he was already dead. A northern soldier was about to pull the horse, and Tyrion shouted long like Casterly Rock and rushed up. The soldier didn't look at the ownerless horse again, and fought with the sword. Sigurd shouted in his heart that it was not good, and tried his best to send a warning to the little demon, but unfortunately the dwarf, who was overwhelmed by victory, only had the idea of killing the enemy at this time. The opponent's equipment was not bad. He was wearing a full-length mail armor, but he had no helmet. He was at least a knight squire. He was tall, not strong but had long arms and legs. The man was injured, and blood was flowing from his forehead. Tyrion was also cunning. He attacked from the blood-stained left eye, aiming at the opponent's forehead without the protection of the helmet. The tall man blocked the attack with his sword. His movements were very rhythmic and orderly, and his martial arts were not weak. "Go to hell, dwarf!" The tall man shouted, but Tyrion rode around him in a circle, and the tall man had to turn around to deal with him. The tall man's swordsmanship was superb, and his moves were fast, fierce and accurate. His target was Tyrion's head and shoulders. Under great pressure, the little devil finally realized that the opponent was not only fast and experienced, but also had terrifying strength. 7 layers of hell, Bronn, were you? Just like all ordinary people, the little devil did not blame himself at first, although the fact was that he was too far away from Bronn, but unfortunately the bad nature of human beings made them always hope that others were wrong. The tall man seemed to see through the imp's weakness, and his long sword launched a more fierce attack. The imp only had time to raise his shield. In fact, it was Sigurd who made this move, and the imp himself had already lost his mind due to the high-intensity confrontation. The shield cracked inwards, shattered on both sides of the iron gauntlet and fell off the horse. "Go to hell, devil!" The tall man raised his sword and chopped it down on the head. Chapter 113 Chaotic Battlefield 4. Sigurd was responsible for blocking the sword again. The poor dwarf was dizzy and could not think of any other way except waiting for death. Even Sigurd felt that it was quite harsh. His short arms would be useless even if he successfully blocked. If he wanted to survive the subsequent combo, he had to find another way. He made up his mind, turned his head, exerted force with his legs, and raised his buttocks. His weapon was the 1-foot-long spike on the helmet. If the tall man did not intend to die with him. If you think carefully, no one in this world would be willing to die with the little devil. The long sword pulled back on the helmet, making a creepy metal friction sound. "Yeah, let's see where you can run." The tall man grinned, as if he was going to launch a more fierce attack. At this time, Sigurd also used his real skills. He directly controlled the warhorse through the body of the little devil. The tall brown warhorse opened its mouth and bit off half of the tall man's cheek. The sharp screams and the exposed skull cheekbones made people unable to bear to look directly. The battle axe rose and fell, and Tyrion added another person to his victory. "Damn you, bastard!" The corpse fell down, as if it fell down after hearing the curse of the little devil. "Fight for Lord Eddard." The loud voice swept from behind, and the little devil quickly turned his horse's head. A fully armed knight charged, and the spiked meteor hammer spun on the knight's head. Damn, the little devil only had time to complain, and the two horses collided. This time, even Sigurd couldn't save him. The meteor hammer flattened his right elbow guard, and the spike penetrated into it. The exploding pain came, and the right hand that was finally saved was unusable, and the battle axe flew out. Damn God! Sigurd cursed loudly in the sea of consciousness. In such a high-intensity battle, the root of the disaster was to let the dwarf die here. He didn't care about being discovered, and controlled the little devil's body to draw the sword. The meteor hammer attacked again, and the little devil fell off the horse with a feeling of vomiting. In his chaotic consciousness, Sigurd kept the little demon from fainting while controlling his posture. Although the situation was extremely bad, he was not a person who would give up easily. The only thing in his vision was the sky. He realized that he was lying on his back. He quickly rolled up and trembled with pain. Under the excessive pain, his vision was blood red and his eyes were black. He tried to control his broken body and not lead himself faint. The knight came over and looked like a giant in front of the dwarf. "Little demon Tyrion." The knight seemed very happy, and his voice became louder and louder. "You are my prisoner, surrender." Sigurd considered this proposal very quickly. Being captured is better than dying. However, the little demon seemed to have regained consciousness at this time. He made a hoarse and meaningless sound and jumped up. His intact left hand fumbled around randomly, as if looking for a sword, dagger or shield. Surrender. The knight sat on his armored warhorse, standing tall like a mountain in front of the poor dwarf. The meteor hammer spun lazily. The little demon was not in a good condition at this time. His vision was blurred, his hands were numb, and he had no weapon. If you don't surrender, you will die. Although I don't want to kill you, there is no honor in killing a dwarf. The knight howled loudly, and the meteor hammer spun rapidly. Sig saw the only chance. No matter what the guards arranged, he had decided to intervene this time. On the surface, it was a staggering rise, but in fact it was a premeditated jump. The little demon hit the horse's belly. The poor warhorse screamed shrilly, and the huge impact threw the little demon out. Blood and internal organs splattered on him. The horse fell straight down. The ice lid of the helmet was sealed by mud and flesh. The little demon who regained control of his body shouted to surrender. I surrender. A voice was painful and weak. Tyrion removed the stuffing of the ice lid and saw the knight pressed by the dead horse. The knight's legs were pressed by the horse's carcass, and his right hand, which was used for cushioning, was bent at an abnormal angle and lay weakly to the side. I surrender, the knight said in a weak but urgent voice, desperately groping around with his good arm. Finally, he got his sword and threw it beside the little devil. My lord, I surrender. The battle continued, but they were no longer in the main battlefield. There was nothing else that could move around except the corpses of people and horses. The crow circled and prepared to land. Tyrion picked up the knight's sword from the ground, and he felt dizzy. Sig's heart was high. A real fierce battle, being able to turn defeat into victory in this situation, was a victory for them against the gods. Miracles are not just the patent of gods. A large number of infantry came to support Sir Kevin's center army. The spearmen pushed the northerners back to the hills, and the two armies continued to fight on the gentle slope. The Lannister spear formation was blocked by the round iron-spiked shields of the heavy infantry. As the spearmen, who were at a disadvantage in terms of terrain and military type, struggled, a hail of arrows fell, and the archers in the center army advanced to the front line. The heavy infantry of the northerners finally couldn't hold on in the rain of arrows and retreated one after another. But their attempt to retreat in an orderly manner was hindered by the charge of the spearmen, and people were constantly pierced or nailed to the ground by arrows. There were wailing sounds all over the city. Sir, you are about to lose, the little devil said to the captive. The sound of horse hooves made the little devil turn around quickly like a frightened bird. In the severe pain, he couldn't use his weapon at all, and could only stare at the other party. Fortunately, the person who came was Bronn. You really can't help, the little devil told him, but the dwarf didn't seem to be angry. Isn't it good? You can handle everything yourself, Bronn said shamelessly, as if he had been watching over it from the side since just now. I have to tell you that the spike on the helmet has fallen off. The two shameless guys smiled at each other. This is a smile after surviving a disaster. Sigurd did not leave yet, wanting to feel the battle, even if it was just for a moment, to feel human again. Drums, horns, and trumpets sounded. With the thunder of hooves, Tywin launched the final blow. He gathered all the Lannister cavalry and charged the Stark army. The imp found his horse again, his battle over, and could only watch with regret as his father galloped past him, surrounded by 500 heavy cavalry. The sun shone on the lances of the cavalry, and the roaring line banner fluttered in the wind. The Stark army was completely broken, and the defeated soldiers retreated faster than when they came. This time it was the Lannister army that spread across the hills. The imp could not participate in the last part of the battle, and he searched for the lost men with Bronn. Wolf fell in a pool of his own blood, disappearing below his elbow, surrounded by the bodies of his fellow moonmen. Shagger sat under a tree, Con lying in his arms, riddled with arrows. The two looked miserable, but when the imp got off his horse, Shagger suddenly opened his eyes and said, Con is dead. The long-haired big man choked up, which was very rare. Con was intact, and the red spot on his chest was the fatal wound. Bronn helped the big man up, and he seemed to have just noticed the arrows. As he pulled out the arrows, he complained that the new armor was pierced with holes. Several arrows pierced his flesh, and Shagger cried out in pain like a child when he pulled them out. When treating Shagger's arrow wounds, Zira came, and she proudly showed off her 4 new ears. Soon, the burning people sent a message that Tywin was busy looting the dead and had no time to join. In the end, the casualties of the mountain bandits were about half. Let Bronn deal with the prisoners, and Zira organized the others to save themselves. The imp found someone to give himself a simple bandage and went to see Tywin. In order to listen to Tywin's strategy nearby, Sig stayed in the imp's sea of consciousness for a while. Tywin sat by the river and was drinking. As if he had just finished a picnic, he let his servant take off his armor leisurely. What a great victory, the wildlings did a good job. Sir Kevin told the little devil. Tywin's eyes were cold, and the little devil couldn't help but shudder, but he was different from before, and he thought he had experienced the baptism of the battlefield. Father, are you surprised and disappointed? His tone was a little sharp. According to calculations, your useless dwarf son should be slaughtered by the enemy. Chapter 114 Chaotic Battlefield 5. Lord Tywin drank the red wine in the cup. His face was normal, as if he didn't take his son's accusation to heart. No matter how venomous his eyes were, he couldn't see any trace of acting. He really didn't care about his son. I arranged the undisciplined troops on the left wing, expecting their defeat. His golden green eyes flashed with calculation. To him, it was obvious that this was a chess game, a game. Robb Stark, a young boy, is more courageous than wise. My strategy is to let him see the collapse of our left wing, and then attack with all his forces. The tactic of flanking is the most effective way to expand the results of the battle at this time. His eyes looked forward, as if he was standing on the top of a hill and saw a duel of thousands of troops. Sir Kevin's center army, spearmen and heavy infantry phalanx will flank the enemy army at all costs and try their best to push them into the Green Fork River. Tywin clenched his fists, as if this was the right-wing cavalry group he had deployed heavily. My right-wing cavalry will make a deterrent attack from the side and rear of the northern army. Whether Stark is willing or not, this attack will be difficult for them to resist. And the reserve troops in my hands will attack the Stark's reserve troops at this time to win the game. You threw me into a massacre without telling me the plan. The little devil's words lost their proper level. He was speaking as a son. A feint would alert people. Tywin replied, how could I reveal the plan to the commander of the mercenaries and barbarians, even if he was my son? What a pity. The little devil frowned and took off his steel gauntlet, letting it fall to the ground. If I had really been told the plan, perhaps some of your wishes would have come true. For that kid's age, his military skills are chilling. Lord Tywin admitted, but victory is victory. During this time, Tyrion stared at his arm bleeding in a daze. Lord Tywin must have seen it, he didn't even ask a question. The little devil felt wronged and cold in his heart, but he still gritted his teeth and said with cold sweat on his forehead, can you find a maester to show me this arm? Or do you think a one-armed dwarf son is more interesting? Tywin did not have the opportunity to show his coldness. With the sound of rapid horse hooves, Adam Marbrand almost rolled off the horse. Lord Tywin. Tywin stood up to greet him. His attitude was more concerned than seeing his injured son. Sig was sure that this was not the little devil's colored eyes. This was the fact. Sir Adam's warhorse was foaming at the mouth and blood was hanging from the corners of its mouth. Even if it didn't die, it could no longer be used as a warhorse. The knight himself was a tall and thin man with dark copper-colored long hair and a dark copper-plated armor. The family emblem of the burning tree was very conspicuous on his chest. The knight knelt on one knee and said, my lord, among our captives, the northern nobles include Earl Severn, Sir Manderley, Caius Stark, and 4 people from the Frey family. Earl Hornwood died in the battle. Among the great nobles, Roose Bolton is missing. He has probably escaped. There was something strange about Sir Adam's report. He looked very uneasy. Although he provided a long list of names of great nobles as if reporting a victory, the most important princes were not included. In addition, what was the reason for his uneasy expression? The victory report and such an expression were the most obvious contrast. Where is the Stark kid? Duke Tywin really had the demeanor of a great general. He was not anxious at all and asked with an indifferent expression. Sir Adam showed a look of fear. Such a brave general was actually trembling. Through the eyes of the little devil, Sigurd had a further understanding of the strength of the Lannisters. My lord, the Stark imp is not in the northern army. I interrogated the Freys and they said that the imp led the main cavalry across the river to Riverrun. What a young imp. The little devil was thinking about Tywin's previous assertion that he had more courage than wisdom. Although his arm hurt badly, he still laughed out loud. Because of the inappropriate laughter, Tyrion did not get the support of the maester. He still treated the wound himself under the guidance of Sigurd in his mind. When did you discover my existence? Sigurd asked helplessly. He realized that he was not as smart as the little devil. This spiritual giant was obviously more difficult to deal with than Ned. The little demon sniffed and frowned as he applied medicine to himself, cursing the gods and the captive who made him suffer. It's not hard to guess. Although you hit it well, I still know what kind of person I am. It was my brother Heine who was so powerful on the battlefield and captured the enemy's noble leader, he answered while tying the splint himself with the help of Sig's pain-blocking nerves. In the wounded camp, many Lannister wounded looked at him with awe, watching him treat his wounds on his own. Many people no longer had contempt and ridicule for the dwarf, and some even forgot to wail. After escaping death several times and turning defeat into victory, with inexplicably agile movements, I already knew that I was tricked. To be honest, I'm not sure. Maybe it's the protection of the gods, until you took the initiative to talk to me. Sig nodded in the field of consciousness. I just don't want you to think of these as gifts from the gods, because the bastard doesn't know how to bestow anything, and there must be no better explanation except for a prank. Lord Sig, I don't know how to call you. Or Lord Viserys. The little devil said teasingly, your existence is really becoming more and more surprising. In fact, I have begun to suspect that since you can control someone at will, then the appearance of you that we see may not be real. He cast a helpless expression signaled with ideology. This also bothers me. In fact, except for Violet, even I can't tell who I am. The boundaries of being a person are too vague for me. Can you tell me what your purpose is? The little devil seemed to be choosing his words, his brain working rapidly. Sig wisely did not disturb him. I mean, if you don't even know who you are, how can you know your purpose? He asked a question that was troubling and frightening to Sig. Maybe the you who are talking to me now is not the real Sig, but a clone of you. Just like my father didn't tell me the real plan in order to make the feint more realistic, maybe the real Sig didn't tell you his plan. You're just a small chess piece. Sig was silent. He didn't plan to have too much contact with the little devil. After all, it was too early and the situation was too chaotic. The little devil's position was that of a Lannister. From the perspective of a dwarf, he should stand on the side of his family. Although Sig's goal fundamentally does not conflict with the interests of the Lannister family, for the time being, the little devil does not need to disregard the interests of his family for Sig's goal. Moreover, Theon, as a hero chosen by the gods to promote the development of history, is currently the opposite of Sig. Putting aside the general trend, from a small perspective, the little devil's words can be said to point directly to Sig's weakness. He knows his own affairs. He is actually a poor man who can't even remember his name and original identity. As the fruit of life takes effect, the body becomes more and more resilient, and the personal strength is so strong that it is incredible, but his intelligence, his consciousness and his personality have not grown so fast. If wisdom and knowledge can be infinitely grown through infinite life and ups and downs, and eventually keep up with the pace of physical growth, then his personality, as a person, how a consciousness recognizes itself, or the strength of his soul itself, has never increased, and may even become more fragile in the journey of different worlds. In a world where Sid had been, human biochemical technology had developed to a high level, and intelligent machines had independent consciousness. Humans themselves increasingly relied on biochemical machines to arm themselves, and even their brains were no exception. In such a highly civilized human society, the boundary between humans and intelligent machines was extremely vague. People could only strengthen the concept of soul and use it to distinguish between humans and intelligent machines. Among the top people in society, the highly developed electronic brains and humans equipped with the most sophisticated brain enhancement equipment were indistinguishable from each other except for a part of brain juice. In addition, virtual reality technology eventually produced the devil's fruit of virtual memory, so that humans could not distinguish themselves by memory. Any virtual personality, relying on virtual memory, might think that they were someone, but in fact they were just copies of a human, or even poor creatures fabricated out of thin air. Sig's problem was far more complicated and difficult than the humans in that world. If he himself was just part of the prank of the root, maybe he was not a human at all, but just the product of a prank. What should he do? Sigurd thanked the little devil and hastily ended their conversation. He just pretended to be mysterious and claimed that the little devil would naturally understand the meaning of his actions in the future. Such an explanation might be useful for an upright person like Ned, but it is meaningless to Tyrion. There is still a lot of work to be done to gain the support of the little devil. As for now, the most urgent task is to find a way to prove that he is real and not a false existence fabricated by a certain consciousness. But can he really find the answer? Chapter 115 Robert returns to the battlefield. 1. There were constant noises in the dense forest. After so many years, Robert once again felt the excitement, nostalgia, and the desire for the bloody taste that was about to fill his mouth and nose. They walked on the path beside the valley, where the stream was rushing and winding. The moonlight was reflected by the waves, sparkling. The knights kept shouting softly, trying to control the noise made by the horses, and the iron hooves slipped on the soft ground, and cursed from time to time. The soldiers whispered rude jokes, and the officers frowned, but just reminded them not to be too loud. The tense atmosphere in the team was pervasive, and those rude jokes could not make people throw away their worries. Robert seemed to have returned to the difficult battle for the throne more than 10 years ago. The collision between the armies, they thought of all kinds of tricks, and the other side was also full of tricks. In the end, both sides could only fight head-on and speak with strength. But what left the deepest impression on him was the night attack, the tense and trembling atmosphere. The collision of spears, the sliding of mail armor buckles. There were too many subtle noises, and the night took away most of people's vision, making the world of sound more mysterious and unpredictable. Everyone, it won't be long before you can see whether you are worth the expensive commission. Harris Moran said in a condescending tone. They belonged to a cavalry unit of hundreds of people, but they were not the direct descendants of Robb Stark, but recruited mercenaries. Compared with the regular army, their equipment was messy. Some used lances, some used long swords, and there were also battle axes, meteor hammers, etc. People like Robert who used heavier hammers were rare. Among the mercenaries, free knights and wandering warriors, there were few heavily equipped troops. Most of them were light infantry, archers and light cavalry. A mercenary team with shields, mail and even plate armor was very rare, and the hire and price of heavy cavalry mercenaries was also very high. If it were not for the urgency of the war, no noble family would be willing to spend money to hire so many mercenary heavy cavalry at once except the Lannister family. Robert took advantage of this opportunity to sneak into the Northerners' team. He followed the others and ignored Sir Moran's advice. He used the corner of his eye to check on Violet, who was disguised as an assistant and assisted him as a light cavalry. Light cavalry were in the front position, always serving as scouts, early warnings and other auxiliary work on the side and front of the heavy cavalry during combat. Robert had a strange feeling that the world seemed to have changed drastically after he was injured. Women should stay at home and look forward to the return of their men, or cry for their beloved men instead of running to the battlefield to protect them. What is coming will come naturally. Robert responded to the arrogant lord. He had rich experience and had long learned to forget the fear of fighting before the battle. In war, there is no reason to talk about. Anyone can face death. Even if you are a martial arts expert in leather armor made of Valyrian steel, you may still die because of an arrow accidentally inserted into the eye. He has seen all kinds of strange deaths, including many highly regarded knights. If you have to find a reason, it is that these people are unlucky. Of course, now he has another possible reason, that is, the prank of the gods. Who did the gods spare? Big man, watch your words, you're talking to Sir Moran, the captain of the guard of Winterfell. Moran's guard said in a shrill voice. I have seen several captains of the guard of Winterfell. The most capable one is Jory, then a fat man, and now it's the turn of a talkative guy. Robert didn't mean to give him a good look. What did you say? Say it again. The servant came over indignantly, disrupting the overall action of the team. York, what are you doing? Shut up. Moran finally knew the importance of the matter and suppressed the arrogant servant. Robert didn't care about these, he had already entered the battle state. It was not a pitiful state of being nervous and swallowing saliva constantly. Robert's battle posture was more free and casual. He could hear the rubbing of leaves in the forest, the gurgling of the stream, and feel the warm wind caressing his face. The closer he got to the eve of the battle, the more relaxed he was. He was looking forward to fighting with the Kingslayer. The Golden Bastard, the legendary alien who never knows how to wait. Once upon a time, in his eyes, the Lannister kid who was despised and ridiculed was regarded as a legendary figure with irritability. People believed that he was highly skilled in martial arts and had unparalleled ability to respond on the battlefield. The only way to defeat him was through strategy and ambush. The Stark kid accepted the advice of the Blackfish and adopted this safe method of warfare. Robert sneered at this. There was no need for strategy to deal with the Kingslayer. As long as he knocked him off his horse from the front like he did when he fought Roeber, the Lannister mob would not be a threat at all. Unfortunately, he was no longer the king, and the Starks were not fighting for the royal family. The sword dancer conveyed Sig's attention, and he needed him to ensure that Jaime Lannister was captured or killed in this battle, and that guy must not be allowed to return to Riverrun. Robert didn't know what Sig's strategy was. He only knew that he could beat the Golden Boy up, which was an idea he had always wanted to do since he became king, but he couldn't realize it. Damn the throne. He got angry when he thought of the frustration he had suffered over the past decade. As the leader of the Seven Kingdoms and the nominal supreme power holder, he could no longer do whatever he wanted like he did in the days of the Duke of Windsor. I was so stupid back then. I was treated as a fool. He cursed his adopted father and Ned in his heart. It was these two guys who put him on the Iron Throne. The team stopped. The entire army was cavalry, crowded in the narrow valley. If the Lannisters find out, it will be fun to attack them in return. Robert teased, but found that Sir Moran, who seemed to have heard him, changed his face. He shook his head in his heart. Winter City was also losing talent. It was scared like this before the war even started. The captain of the guard, who should be the most powerful, looked like this. His true combat power was really worrying. People whispered from the back. People and horses were squeezed to both sides, and a road was forcibly opened up. Young Robert, without a helmet, his red hair swaying in the breeze, he patted the man's shoulder, or joked with another, sometimes helping the soldiers to calm the horses. His armor rustled as he walked, although it didn't look like Ned, but Robert's every move had the demeanor of Ned in the past. Maybe he would be Ned again in a few years. Pray for the North, another Ned would be too boring. Robert wisely didn't say his thoughts. The great direwolf quietly passed through the herd, causing the horses to nigh in panic. Damn, when did this guy come? Don't scare your horses crazy at the critical moment. Rob's figure disappeared in the dense forest of people and horses. Moraine gave the order, and the team regrouped and moved closer to the predetermined position. In order to be as hidden as possible, everyone dismounted and led the horses up the gentle slope. Although the obstacles had been cleared in advance, it was a crazy idea to ride an armored warhorse through the woods late at night. He bet that no matter the outcome of this battle, more people would be killed by trees than by swords. Wearing heavy armor, climbing on a slippery hillside, and leading a warhorse that kept slipping, there was nothing more stupid and ridiculous than this. Robert spat and swallowed his curse. After all, it was an ambush war, and it was located at a high place. Any abnormal movement might make the ambush fail. He didn't want to see Jen shout and run away from him. The most anticipated thing in this battle was to kick Jaime Lannister's ass. The waiting was tormenting. There were restless movements of people and horses all around. Even if no one spoke, one could feel the anxiety and uneasiness in the atmosphere. The focus of the battle was the bait for the King's Lair, the 300 elite light cavalry led by Blackfish. In order to gather enough skilled light cavalry, many Rider Knights were forced to take off their plate armor, put on bows and axes and play the role of light cavalry. It is said that in order to trick Jaime, Blackfish's scouts and sharpshooters worked day and night to shoot down all crows flying in the direction of River Run. As for the enemy's scouts, they would not let go of any of them and would hunt them down to death. According to Blackfish's boasting, they did not let go of a single bird, nor did they let any scout escape. The King's Lair was still in the dark. Blackfish was the best scout commander Robert had ever seen, and his performance in the Battle of the Night King was no accident. According to his intelligence, the Lannister army had a total of 12,000 infantry, camped in 3 places, scattered around River Run. Robert was there when he reported the enemy situation, and heard Blackfish's rough laughter with his own ears. Surrounding River Run and setting up camp in 3 places is the only way, but it is also their fatal flaw. Jaime's cavalry has 2,000 to 3,000, which is less than ours. The King's Lair has 3 times as many troops as us. Someone said in a trembling voice. If Robert was the commander, he would definitely twist off the coward's head first as a sacrifice. Obviously Robert was not such a person. He gestured to Blackfish to explain, yes, if we fight head-on, we have no chance of winning. But the King's Lair lacks one thing that gives us a chance to win. What is it? Robert asked for everyone. Patience. The smile lines on Blackfish's weathered old face gradually spread. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Robert returns to the battlefield. 2. In order not to be mistaken for Renly, Robert specially put on makeup for this war. Now he has a rough pock-marked face and a terrifying scar across the bridge of his nose that makes people shudder. However, his majestic figure cannot be concealed. In many ways, among the knights and lords, he is particularly conspicuous. Hey buddy, he's a mercenary, right? What do you think? Are you not optimistic that we can defeat the King's Lair against him? Blackfish asked. The princes turned to Robert with doubts in their eyes. Robert could understand what Blackfish meant. He wanted to use his mouth to express the thoughts of ordinary soldiers and dispel people's concerns about the famous regicide. After all, Jaime Lannister has been famous for decades. When people talk about the Battle of the Trident, however in his decisive battle, the Mad King and even the Sword of the Dawn, it is inevitable to mention regicide. Or, in the eyes of ordinary people, Jaime Lannister, a pretty boy who likes to be fancy, is a living legend. Among the mercenaries, Robert really felt people's fear of the regicide. Even the most experienced mercenaries would not challenge Jaime Lannister lightly. When ambushing and sniping the Lannister army, this situation is very bad. The most fearful thing is that no one dares to fight the King's Lair, resulting in failure, and even being overturned by the Lannister army is not impossible. You understand, you have found the wrong person. Robert chuckled. "I'm a rough guy. I don't know about strategy, but when it comes to bravery," he puffed up his chest and looked down at the people present. "I didn't make it in time to participate in the Battle of the Trident. Otherwise, killing Robert's reputation has nothing to do with Robert." Rob and the noble lords burst into laughter, and even Blackfish couldn't help laughing, but he still felt the disdainful looks around him, and it was obvious that everyone just regarded him as a rough man. Bragging, no one really took him seriously. This feeling was so fresh. Robert almost forgot that he was no longer the king. Such statements would only be regarded as lies. He smiled and left the place where the big men gathered. If he really went to the battlefield, he would kill James. That bastard. Can they still laugh? The strength of the troops is still increasing. In order to ensure that one hit is sure to hit, in addition to the elite Stark cavalry troops, there are also Count Jason Mallister's seaside city troops, as well as small princes and skirmishers from Riverrun City. Although the troops arriving one after another are not organized, they are quite numerous just by looking at them. The short rest and gathering came to an end, and people continued to urge their horses forward. Due to the addition of other troops, the organization was somewhat chaotic, but Stark's heavy cavalry were still eye-catching. The army in the north was still the absolute main force of the army with its sophisticated equipment, strict discipline and predictable combat effectiveness. The army continues to advance, and they must complete the deployment of traps before Jaime Lannister arrives. In a sense, the success of the ambush is determined before the battle. Mrs. Stark appeared in the core of the central army. Although the battle formation was deployed without delay, no one bothered her. She personally tied up the shield for Rob and handed him the helmet. The moment Rob put down his mask, he transformed from a young boy into a tall and handsome young knight. Robert looked at this scene sourly, thinking in his mind that if it was Joffrey, he would be more heroic than Robert, but why wasn't Jaqqiel his son? The annoyance is turning into anger. After a while, he will vent his anger on the king's lair through the warhammer, hoping that his small body can bear it. Robert turned the horse's head and led the Chinese army forward. This was also the signal for the army to enter the fighting position. Various sounds mixed in the dense forest, as if some kind of giant creature was hiding in it, waiting for an opportunity to move. Robert's mercenary heavy cavalry troops also began to take action. They were positioned on the flanks of Robert's core guards. During the battle, they would rush forward to protect the flanks of Robert's guards and take the lead in engaging the enemy. Rob's personal guards are all fake. The princes in the north scrambled to allocate their heirs to the side of Rob, who they called the young Wolf Lord. If you judge the quality of an army by its bravery and the quality of its equipment, this group of people is naturally considered elite. Unfortunately, war is mainly about people. Robert and his bodyguards are all inexperienced rookies. Although the immature young knights have good physical conditions, their strength is not mature and they will never be able to fight against mature and experienced middle-aged warriors on the battlefield. Robert saw that this was perhaps the only weakness of the northern army. For ordinary lords, this situation is nothing. After all, most lords bring their personal guards as reserves far away from the actual battlefield. When they break into the war zone, their victory is already certain, or they flee because a defeat is imminent. He saw through Rob's character. Like Ned, his son was also that type to lead by example. It would be nice to wait until he grew up, but it was too early now. It's hard to say how the heavy cavalry regiment constructed by a young master will perform on the battlefield. Arriving at the scheduled ambush site, the general slope of the dense forest is very unfriendly to the warhorses, and the burden on the warhorses cannot be relieved. The knights must constantly guide the warhorses back to their fixed positions. The waiting is extremely difficult and busy. The high-pitched and sharp chirping of birds penetrated the dense forest like a cold hand, making the atmosphere in the army tense. Another bird trilled in response, then a third, and a fourth. This was the call of the snow shrike, the bird of the north. Here they come. Robert then put down his visor, adjusted his lance, and hung the warhammer that had not been used for many years within easy reach. It was only at this moment that he began to become nervous, his muscles twitching slightly due to the tension, and endless strength surged out. He adjusted his breathing, making it as long as possible, and patted the warhorse. This carefully selected black stallion was very smart, chopping its hooves rhythmically, which was the preparation posture of the horses. They are coming. Sir Murat started to prepare his equipment while talking nonsense. His mask opened and lowered, and he looked disturbed. Robert spat. May the gods be with us. The woods fell silent. In the silence all around, there was an unusually thick mist, as if time had stood still. The rumble of hoof that sounded from far and near, as if rolling thunder was coming from the direction of Riverrun. The sounds of guns, swords and armors clashed, the soldiers murmured to themselves, laughed, cursed and shouted one after another. Time seemed to pass very slowly. Robert knew that this was an overly tense relationship, and he breathed slowly again. The unbridled clamor is getting louder and louder, and more laughter means that the enemy's mentality is relaxing. The officers were issuing orders, and similar syllables were constantly spoken from different mouths, echoing in the valley. The horses crossed the stream, causing the water to fly. Robert seemed to see the clear stream becoming turbid, and the white swells flickering in the moonlight. Through the gaps in the dense forest, he seemed to see someone, that familiar figure. The blonde hair and gold armor were dyed silvery white by the moonlight, and the bright red cloak was smoked black and purple. The guy was so bold that he didn't wear a helmet. The silver figure appeared and disappeared, followed by a long, seemingly endless cavalry. All kinds of armor are bright and flags are fluttering. Among them there must be sworn knights, free riders, heavy cavalry and lancers. If Blackfish's intelligence is accurate, this long cavalry is at least 3/4 of the Lannister army's cavalry. This guy won't stay in the camp or sit in the siege tower. Blackfish's assurance was still ringing in his ears. Robert hated himself a little. He should have promoted Blackfish to his right-hand man back then. We tested it. Let Jaime led the cavalry attack 3 times, each time using large numbers of rangers as bait. Robert's mind recalled the previous night's tactical planning meeting. Blackfish will attack him here. Moraine pointed to the map and said, not too many, not too little, 200 or 300 people are enough, using the flag of the Tully family. He will definitely pursue me, and I will. Moraine seemed to be the one who was proudly as the tactician. He moved his finger an inch to the left and said, ambush here. His hands looked pale under the feral light, and his calloused fingers drew a circle around the hills, valleys, and streams. A lap of pride. The battlefield for the ambush was carefully chosen. In the silent night, the moonlight poured in, and all kinds of unknown black shadows were numerous. The ground was covered with fallen leaves, and the ridges and dense forests were everywhere, making it difficult to distinguish. The gentle slope of the hills extends to the riverbed. The lower the terrain is, the more open it becomes. From a distance, you can see the sharp blades hidden in the dense forest reflecting the moonlight from time to time. That's where Robert and his bodyguards were. Just as Robert guessed, the young ice wolf didn't want to stay in the safe rear. He led his young men to the forefront. The low and melodious sound of the horn crashed down from the east side of the canyon and blasted into the river valley. Chapter 117 Robert returns to the battlefield. 3. This was a predetermined notice, telling everyone that Jaime's troops had entered an ambush. The howling of the direwolves was a clearer indication in the battle horn. Robert began to like these beasts, as if their calls could inspire people's bloodlust. This is the sound of death. Woo, woo, a long horn sounded from the opposite ridge, which was the signal for the Great Yuan to lead his troops to attack. On the east and west sides, the Malisters and Freys also blew horns or trumpets one after another. The northern mouth of the valley was extremely narrow, like the bend of the elbow, and the constant war drums came from that direction. Deep and rich, full of morning sounds. In the valley below, the enemy shouted loudly, with different tones and different tones, but all full of anxiety and despair. The ominous rustling sound rose from the hills, dense forests and various high places where people could be waited for, and fell with a harsh shriek, which was the rain of arrows sprinkled by the archers. The Whispering Wood was the name of this ambush area, and it forced out the breath that had been suppressed for a long time. The silence disappeared, and the unusual tranquility was replaced by the wailing of horses and men. The warriors raised their spears one after another, and the cloth strips, dry grass and even soil used to block the reflection fell with a rustling sound. The cruel blades screamed in the night wind. Long live Winterfell. As the rain of arrows fell again, the core cavalry of Robert's cavalry shouted in unison. Sir Moraine also joined the shouting. Robert curled his lips, long live freedom. He urged his horse forward under the surprised gaze of his comrades around him. In order to hide, their position was blocked by bushes and branches, and they could not directly see the battle in the river valley. But looking forward, they could see the Great Yuan's cavalry, forming a long and seemingly endless horizontal column and charging down. For a moment, the cavalry passed an area without shade from the trees. Under the white moonlight, the sharp spear tips flashed a straight line of light. Although Robert urged his horse early, he was not in a hurry to speed up. It was not because he was timid, but to conserve horsepower. He wanted to make the first charge the most powerful one. Some inexperienced rookies had already rushed to the front. When they passed by, they could see contempt or disdain through the slits of their armor. Idiots, rushing to the battlefield, the horses are already tired and there's no point. Slow down the horses, listen to my command and charge together, listen to my command. Moraine seemed to have some experience, but it was too late to find the problem at this time. The cavalry could not stop the momentum, and the organization and formation were in chaos. The echoes in the valley were crisscrossed, and the crackling sound of broken spears was endless. The sound of swords clashing gradually became the main theme. Long live Lannister! Long live Winter City! The voices echoed each other, and from time to time, you could hear a few shouts of fight for Riverrun. And long live the Talais! Robert did not charge blindly. He had a goal, but it was not Moran's. He looked for a beautiful figure in the chaotic night, and the most elegant one among the various cloaks died inky by the night. Although Violet was disguised as a light cavalry, her appearance was difficult to recognize, but the agility and elegance of a sword dancer were something that no one else could learn. Following Arryn launching the fastest charge, she would lead her to the location of the King's lair. Although Robert had no hatred in his heart, it did not prevent him from wanting to smash Jaime Lannister's head with his warhammer. The horse's hooves were running, the iron boots splashed shallow water, the dull sound of the sword hitting the shield, and the noise of steel colliding. Robert had no time to pay attention to the scum. He had to save his strength to deal with the real target. Only by taking the man's head could his increasingly bad mood improve. Arrows whistled in his ears, and he seemed to be sniped by an archer. But firstly, his horse was very fast, and armored horses were not so easy to shoot to death. He let his horse run wildly, ignoring the small wooden strips hitting and falling on the shield and armor. From time to time, enemy cavalry or foot soldiers would try to attack from the side. Robert would either block with his shield or smash the opponent's weapon with his warhammer. There were several times when the enemy rushed over, and Robert kept his lance and directly knocked the opponent off the horse with his warhammer. The drums were thundering, and thousands of horses screamed at the same time. People either cursed loudly or begged for mercy. Some people were spared from death, but more people were doomed. Because of the valley, the sound positioning method lost its function. He seemed to hear Rob's voice next to him, "Follow me." He heard the roar and roar of the direwolf again. Sharp teeth tore the meat, and people and horses let out fearful wails. Fierce collisions became more and more frequent in front. This was not a battle between infantry and cavalry, or infantry and cavalry, but the sound of heavy cavalry fighting. Robert stared at the front. Violet's gracefulness continued. He squeezed past the hesitant friendly knights and felt the confusion and doubt in their helmets. Fools, this is the time to charge. Violet's figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It was not that he was too fast, but that she was intersected. The sword dancer dressed as a thing mercenary, wielding a long sword, fighting 3 Lannister knights at the same time in an narrow space. A bunch of bastards, watch me. Robert picked up the warhammer and rushed towards the outermost one. The man was good at martial arts and raised his shield in time to meet him. The shield with oak iron edges shattered, and the knight screamed, and his iron gloves and wrist guards twisted into strange shapes. The scream stopped abruptly, and the wire-like thin sword pierced from the back of his neck and came out from his mouth, bringing out 2 front teeth. Stupid guy, he didn't even guard against Violet in front. The other 2 knights were about to attack from behind, but Violet's horse rushed forward. She turned back with the sword and just swept away the 2 people's fierce attacks. Don't worry about me, go there, Rob is in danger. In the chaos, Violet didn't care about anything else. She shouted a beautiful female voice with a man's face. Robert nodded, turned his horse's head and galloped towards the crowded direction of heavy cavalry. Under the moonlight, the silver Jaime Lannister led a few cavalry like a lion interspersed among the sheep, constantly eliminating the northern knights who dared to stop them. Although there were more northern warriors, they could not organize an effective formation. They were scattered by the King's lair. Jaime Lannister did not charge without purpose. He always chased another group with his men. The flag and shield of the direwolf are both distinctive symbols. Jaime took the lead and rushed towards the 2 long-haired, unusually tall warriors. Robert recognized the 2. They were the sons of Duke Karstark. This ancient family legend has the blood of giants. In fact, they were indeed tall and mighty, wielding long swords and battle axes, attacking the King's lair from 2 directions. In the moonlight, the blond boy gorgeously let the horse rise up, and the iron hooves continued to stomp, catching the sword-wielding Karstark off guard. The sword was kicked away by the horse, and he barely used his shield to block the attack of the other hoof. Taking advantage of this gap, Jaime swung a sword to meet Karstark, who was wielding the battle axe. The sword and axe collided, and metal and iron clashed, sparks flew. The body of the Karstark boy twitched and fell off the horse. The dagger in Jaime's left hand drew a perfect half arc, and the blood on the blade flashed an ominous red in the moonlight. Karstark, who had lost his longsword, only then stabilized his body. He barely drew out the short sword and blocked Jaime's slash, but was pierced by the lance of the Lannister warrior beside him. Jaime threw the body away and continued to move forward. There were several young knights on the road, and they all subconsciously dodged. In front of Jaime was Rob. The little guy did not continue to flee in panic, but turned his horse to fight. He took a defensive stance with his sword and shield, and made it clear that he would hold Jaime back so that the friendly forces could assemble. The sword flashed, and Rob's horse was split in the head by Jaime's sword. When the corpse fell, the young wolf also fell off the horse. Jaime's sword flashed like thunder. Rob finally stood up and could not fight back. The ice wolf wooden shield in his hand burst. At this moment, the battlefield became quiet, and everyone was watching Jaime's next move. If he split Rob, the northern army would be leaderless. Robert, who had driven his horse to the extreme speed, arrived, and his carefully preserved lance came in handy. With the help of the impact of the warhorse, the lance pierced Jaime's warhorse. Chapter 118 Robert returns to the battlefield. 4. The spear pierced the belly of the warhorse, but unfortunately it missed Jaime, who fell off the horse first and rolled to avoid the horse's corpse and the trampling of other Lannister cavalry. Robert snorted in distress. He raised his hand to throw away the remaining spear shaft, and without looking back, he took the initiative to meet the two-handed sword with his shield. Wood chips flew, the shield shattered, and the Lannister knight was also knocked off the horse. Robert raised his warhammer and hit another Lannister's axe hard. The reverberation of broken bones and torn flesh made people's scalps numb. The axe broke at the axe handle, and the red-robed warrior's right hand was also broken. The screams did not last long, and the great Yuan who came later gave the wounded the final blow. Robert moved his warhorse and caught up with Jaime, who had just pulled a northern boy off the horse. Judging from the family emblem, he was another heir of Khal Stark. These giants were like children in front of the king's lair and could not withstand a single blow. Robert did not give him a chance to mount his horse. He swung his hammer, barely brushing Jaime's shoulder and hitting the stirrup. The horse wailed and fell, spitting blood mixed with internal organs. Jaime rolled to the side, holding his shoulder. Robert was in high spirits, laughing loudly, and jumped off the horse with an agility that was disproportionate to his body's size. For many years, he had been suffering from obesity and a big belly, and could not be so light as a swallow. Now he really has to thank Violet for her exercise rehabilitation plan. The battlefield around him fell silent, and even the red-robed warriors stopped fighting temporarily. Everyone was looking at him. He had been treated like this when fighting however. This was the Battle of Kings, but it was a pity that the opponent was a little weak. He deliberately left the king's lair some time to prepare, because it would be too unsatisfying to kill this kid too quickly. Get your sword ready. Without deliberately hiding his voice, Robert laughed wildly and approached the king's lair. The latter said sternly, "Let me see how capable this pretty boy who keeps swinging a sword behind people is. Who are you?" "Renly or Stannis. You actually sold yourself to the rebels in the north." Jaime seemed to want to buy time, but Robert had no intention of being fooled. "I'll send you to see the Seven Gods, and you'll know." The powerful hammer was swung out, and Jaime dodged it lightly, and turned around to slash horizontally. His movements were agile and nimble, not like he had just fallen off the horse. Unfortunately, Robert was also finning, and his hammer handle pressed down, and Jaime's longsword could not bear the force and deviated. "With this little ability, you dare to call yourself an Iron Guard? Let me tell you, if it was a head-on confrontation, the Mad King would be able to chop you up." No need to say more, the Kingslayer's face turned pale, and he used the sharp spikes of the sword's guard to poke the slits of Robert's armor, and almost succeeded. "Where is your arrogance just now? I still have many tricks," Jaime said sarcastically. "You are really good with your words. Is that what Tressae likes?" Taking advantage of Jaime's angry expression, Robert used the weight of the hammer handle as a hammer to hit him. The Kingslayer didn't dare to take it head-on and dodged it by half-jumping. "What, you don't even have the confidence to fight me? It seems that your ability is only to seduce women." "Asshole." Jaime gritted his teeth and attacked fiercely. Unexpectedly, an ugly giant sword appeared beside him. "Boy, Great Yuan, will put an end to you." It was another northern giant. Robert sneered. He waited leisurely for Great Yuan to be beaten back. Sure enough, within 2 heartbeats, the big guy's helmet was knocked off and he crawled out of the battle group in embarrassment. For such a looker, Robert was not willing to even look at it. He pulled off the helmet that was in the way and threw it aside. "Okay, pretty boy, you've rested enough. Come and let me smash your handsome face that women like." The two men set up their positions again, and this time no one dared to interrupt their fight again. "You don't have a handsome face, that's jealousy." Jaime laughed and rushed forward with his sword. Robert stopped talking nonsense and dodged the fierce stab. Jaime had a faint smile on his face. He realized that the opponent must have a trick. Sure enough, the longsword suddenly rotated at his waist and the trend of the longsword changed to a horizontal chop. "Good boy." Robert ignored the sharpness of the longsword and reached out to grab the blade. The iron gauntlet was cut and blood gushed out. He twisted the sword body hard and twisted the sword into a twist shape. Before Jaime could draw the sword, he clamped the sword with his armpit. Jaime's face was pale. He tried twice to pull out the sword but failed. Then he jumped forward with it coal-like flashing in his hand. Robert was waiting for this moment. The warhammer was waiting for him. Jaime couldn't dodge. With a ding, the dagger was broken and the broken blade flew out. Jaime let go of his sword and dodged the hammer, but Robert also let go of his hammer and hit him hard on the forehead with his iron fist. When the fighting stopped, Robb and his men went to his mother as soon as possible. Robert had no choice but to follow. The people around him no longer regarded him as an ordinary sellsword. They looked at him as if they were looking up at a ferocious beast. "You're hurt." Catelyn looked her son up and down worriedly. Robb raised his hand and stretched out 5 fingers. "It's okay," he said. Maybe it's Tyrion's blood, or his resolute face didn't look like a 15-year-old child at all. "I don't know." Robert followed a large group of people up the slope. Everyone was dirty, their armor was dented or damaged, but the morale of the warriors was high, and they laughed and cursed. Perhaps out of respect for Robert's achievements, they let him walk behind Robb, followed by Greyjoy and Theon, who held Jaime Lannister on the left and right. "Kingslayer." The voice of Sir Moran, who always did things in vain, came from a distance. Lannister looked up, no longer the heroic knight spirit. His face was covered with stains, and blood flowed from the wound on his head. That was the result of Robert's heavy punch. "Lady Stark." The morning light finally broke through the great fog of the night and sprinkled on the whispering woods, and also returned his golden hair to him. "I am happy to serve you, but unfortunately I forgot where I put my sword." In this field, Jaime was still teasing women, and Robert had to admire his courage. "Sir." Although Catelyn had aged a little in the past few months, her charm remained, and her eyes flashed with a rare strength among noble ladies. "I want my father, my brother Edmure, and my 2 daughters and husband. I'm afraid I don't know where they are." The Kingslayer smiled at the corner of his mouth, as if provoking. "What a pity." Catelyn responded coldly. "Kill him, Robb," Theon suggested loudly. "That's not worth it." Robert spoke, and his response immediately attracted everyone's attention, especially Catelyn. She stared at Robert again and again in disbelief, but shook her head in disappointment. It cost so much to catch this bastard, just killing him was too easy for him. Although Robert also wanted to kill him, he hated the kind of guy who liked to stab on the back the most, not to mention that the Kingslayer was insidious enough. If he was not careful in this confrontation, he would be in a different place. "Mother, this is Derek. He saved me, and he also overthrew the Kingslayer. Without him, I might have died." Robert did not hide his admiration for Robert and tried his best to recommend him to Catelyn. "Isn't it surprising?" Jaime laughed on the side. "There are really so many similar people in this world. Although they look different, their voices and personalities, as well as his skills are so similar to Robert. If he hadn't taken off his helmet, I would have thought Robert was resurrected from the dead." "Take him away," Catelyn said coldly. "Do as my mother commands," Robb commanded. "Make sure he is well guarded." Lord Karstark would have liked to have him impaled on a spear. The Great Yuan gestured, and the Kingslayer was led away. Catelyn looked at Robert and bowed. "Thank you, respected Sir Drake." "You're welcome. I'm not a noble, let alone a knight. I'm just a sellsword and I hate Lannister sellswords." Robert clenched his fist and tapped on his breastplate. "It's an honor to help you solve your problems. If I have a chance next time, I hope to get Tywin's hat for you, but the price needs to be more generous." The people around laughed out loud, and Robb also had a smile on his face. He patted Robert on the shoulder. "Sir Drake, no matter who you were before, you are now a VIP of our Winterfell. I believe no one will deny your status. Please don't dislike the cold in the north." Catelyn immediately bowed to him. "Respected Lord Drake, I thank you not as Lady Stark, but as a mother, and I implore you to continue to help us mother and daughter. If you don't mind, I will act as a matchmaker and urge my sister, Lady Sansa of the Vale of Arryn, to marry a hero like you." After Catelyn finished speaking, everyone was petrified on the spot. Even Robert was choked and couldn't speak for a long time. Chapter 119 Judgment 1. The bells of the Red Keep Tower echoed throughout the city. At first, they sounded profound and far-reaching, but later, they sounded irritating, as if a madman was knocking on the tower. Joffrey wore a scarlet silk robe, and a smooth satin belt embellished the robe with luxury. His body was embroidered with leaping stags and roaring lions. When he was getting dressed in front of the mirror, he doubted whether he could walk with so many beasts gathered on his body. The maid held the slender golden crown and wanted to put it on him. He politely indicated that he could do it himself, and the maid bowed and left. From the eyes of this maid who looked less than 20 years old, he saw the eyes of a young girl in love and longing. Just like how Sansa looked at him, Joffrey was very troubled by this. He didn't want to see girls crying, but he knew clearly that he was not a suitable person to comfort women. He was not in a hurry to put on the crown. Although he was the most legitimate heir in legal terms, he had no intention of refusing or retreating. For the prosperity of the Seven Kingdoms, he hoped that he could be a better king than his father. Perhaps he could not be as brave as his father, and his popularity was also insufficient, but he decided to make up for it with diligence. So these days, he worked day and night. During the day, he appeared in the royal meeting to discuss national policies with his mother and important ministers. In the afternoon, he opened the court to accept people's visits and listen to the people's sufferings. At night, he took the things he could not finish reviewing back to the study. Fortunately, Myrcella would come to help, and sometimes Tommen would come to accompany him. Although Sansa was not suitable for participating in these things, she always used the excuse of waiting for Myrcella to make tea for everyone in the living room or help the maid prepare cakes. Since becoming king, he realized that this position was far less glamorous than it seemed. The court officials, who should be the king's greatest support, always interfere with him. Everything becomes extremely complicated under the veiled discussions. Simple disaster relief measures become terrifying problems under the game of multiple parties. That's not all. Although the mother is fierce, her starting point seems to be wrong. She always puts Casterly Rock first and prioritizes the interests of Casterly Rock. However, the truth is that not everything that is good for Casterly Rock is good for the Seven Kingdoms. Joffrey reminded his mother several times that he is the guardian of the entire Seven Kingdoms, not just serving the West, but he was ridiculed and despised by his mother. Annoying things come one after another. When looking down at King's Landing, the sound of the bells makes people irritable, and the dense crowds of people crowded in the streets remind people of ants that come to find rotten prey and follow the smell. The bells are getting louder and louder, and the crowds are getting more and more turbulent, and the speed of the crowds is getting slower and slower. Joffrey suddenly felt horrified. What a terrible experience it would be to fall in the crowd. That person would not be able to get up and would be trampled to death by the people behind him. What would happen if someone had ill intentions and used a weapon in the crowd? The crowd was noisy and nothing seemed to be able to stop them from moving forward. What would happen if a shop on the road caught fire and the flow of people could not move smoothly? Joffrey was scared and broke into a cold sweat. He hurriedly ordered his servants to contact the guards of the capital city, hoping that they could think of a solution. He stood anxiously at the window thinking about countermeasures. Just shouting is not enough. There are too many people. The people in front may be able to hear you, but the people behind you can't hear what you are saying at all. A few guards are not enough. Too few people will only be drowned by the crowd and become part of the crowd. If a strong warrior wants to fight against the tide and does not move with the flow of people, he will inevitably be trampled to death. Joffrey couldn't help but feel annoyed by his poor intelligence. He thought of his uncle Tyrion, maybe he could think of a solution. Feeling depressed by his own thoughts, he thought of his dwarf uncle instead of his majestic and sharp-eyed grandfather. "Your Majesty," the servant said with a terrified look, "I cannot deliver your message." "Why?" Facing Joffrey's gaze, the servant lowered his head even more. "I can't leave the Red Keep at all. There are too many people outside." Joffrey was stunned. He couldn't help but shake his head. "I hope nothing goes wrong today. Please write it down for me. When we hold big events in the future, we can't do it on King's Landing, but in the suburbs." The venue at the last tournament was a good place. Joffrey prayed to the seven gods while watching the crowds gather. When the crowd passed through Silent Sisters Street, they were already shoulder to shoulder and could no longer move smoothly. The royal steward came to greet him and went to the top of the hill in Sania, where the marble square in front of the cathedral was the place for the trial. The Great September of St. Baelor was an unusual court, implying absolute justice under the gaze of the gods. Joffrey couldn't help but smile bitterly. The gods must know the truth, but this truth is definitely not what is said outside, and it is not even what is expressed in the royal order. But how can such a truth be made public? The so-called fairness and justice did not exist from the beginning. Joffrey couldn't help but feel discouraged. He really wanted to stand up and explain everything, but the price was too high, and too many relatives were involved. When he came to the square, all the objects of the trial were placed on the pulpit of the archbishop. Lord Eddard Stark stood aside with the support of two golden robes. Although Lord Stark was dressed decently, his face was trimmed and his hair was done. However, he looked haggard, which was very different from his impression of the Guardian of the North. The Duke wore a thick grey velvet coat with a white wolf embroidered with pearls on the chest, and a grey woolen cloak on his shoulders. His face was full of pain. He was once one of the best warriors in the Seven Kingdoms, but now he had to rely on guards to support himself to stand. Next to the Duke was the High Sexton, a short, stout fellow, with grey hair that indicated that he was in his old age, and an overall bloated look. The High Sexton wore a pure white robe and a huge, exaggerated crown made of gold foil and crystals. As the sun shone on it, the crown shone with colorful light. Joffrey put on the golden crown when he arrived. He knew that he would be dazzling today, and when he passed by, everyone looked at him with admiration or envy. His mother stood beside him, wearing a black dress, and a few strands of red silk seemed like residual blood in the color of the night. She was beautiful and solemn, and the black diamond's veil added a sense of mourning. Joffrey nodded to the Hound, who changed out of his grey blue cloak and wrapped his dark grey armor with a snow-white cape that belonged only to the King's Guard. 4 King's Guards surrounded him, making this ugly warrior look noble. There was no special change among the ministers. Pycelle still wore a heavy maester's necklace, a silver-edged cloak wrapped around his little finger, and eunuchs in painted brocade robes walked among the nobles and ministers in slippers, conducting his endless intelligence trading. Sansa was also in the stands. She was wearing a sky-blue silk dress, and her maroon hair was let down, naturally draped over her shoulders, looking mature and steady. She wore many silver bracelets on her hands, which did not look too gorgeous, but also had a different kind of charm. She was smiling at him, with a trusting look in her eyes, which hurt him. After smiling at her, he quickly looked away, and he felt ashamed of his meanness. From now on, he would change the impression of being wise and diligent, and give people a sense of tyranny and madness. This was Sig's request. The royal family, nobles, and clergy stood on the pulpit, and a row of golden-robed spearmen separated the crowd from them. The spearmen looked solemn as if they were carrying out a sacred mission. But Joffrey could not agree with them. Obviously, the guardians are separated from the people they are supposed to protect, so why would anyone glorify this behavior? The sturdy man was wearing armor that didn't match his appearance at all. The black enamel in the armor was inlaid with gold threads. The man's cloak was made of real gold threads, flashing an unusual metallic luster. Although he was dressed in luxury, he gave people a strange feeling, a sense of incoordination. Joffrey had no good feelings for this man. He was the commander of the Gold Cloaks who betrayed Stark, and he was the captain of the guard who took the lead in a sneak attack in front of the throne and killed the prime minister. Although the beneficiary was the royal family, Joffrey couldn't stand this upstart with a frog face. If it weren't for his mother's strong recommendation and Pythion's good words, he would not have been willing to promote him to a knight, let alone give him a fiefdom and a position as an important minister. He hated Janos Slynt. Silence enveloped the square. Joffrey felt relieved. The tower bells that had been ringing since early in the morning seemed to still echo in his mind. Although it was a public trial, as if everything had just begun, Joffrey knew that everything had been rehearsed. Even Lord Stark had been personally negotiated by the eunuchs and his mother, and every word he said was arranged. This was not a trial at all, but a drama, a stage play performed for the people of King's Landing. When Joffrey thought of noble people performing on a stage like a troupe, he felt extremely hypocritical. Even though he knew rationally that such performances had their purpose, he still felt disgusted, and even felt a sense of alienation from the crown and the throne. Chapter 120 Judgment 2. Lord Stark raised his head and began to speak. His voice was so soft that even though the square was so big, Joffrey on the stage could hear it. Speak louder. What the hell? Are you a woman? Someone shouted from the audience. Sir Janos Slynt, the upstart in black and gold armor, walked behind the Duke and stabbed his injured leg with his sheathed sword. The Duke's body immediately shrunk, and the sweat on his forehead turned into a stream. Although Lord Stark was a traitor and Janos was one of his own, Joffrey still angrily broke the back of the table and chair. His action shocked the nobles and ministers around him. Your Majesty, Lord Eddard was injured and stayed in the dungeon for so long, so he is weak, so his voice cannot be loud. Please be merciful and let him go. Varys spread his soft hands and persuaded slowly. Joffrey also saw Sansa's pleading eyes. They misunderstood him. It was inconvenient to explain in this situation. Considering what he was going to do later, what was the point of explaining again? Silently apologizing to Sansa in his heart, Joffrey had a stern face, as if he was trying to hold back his anger. Lord Stark raised his voice. I am the Duke of Winterfell, the Hand of the King, Eddard Stark. His voice gradually became louder and soon echoed in the square. Here today, before the gods of heaven and the people of King's Landing, his expression was painful. I confess my treason. People began to yell, and all kinds of dirty words and swear words flew in the air. The nobles whispered, and Sansa buried her face deep in her hands. Joffrey glanced at the ministers inexplicably. Even though he was mentally prepared and knew what Stark would say, he was still very curious about how Varys and his mother persuaded Lord Stark. It must be a threat. It must not be a threat with the Duke's life, because the Duke is a warrior and has been on the battlefield for a long time. As a witness of the battlefield, Joffrey knew that Lord Eddard was not afraid of death, so threatening him with the Duke's life was out of the question. What if it was a relative? Lady Stark was far away in the Vale of Arryn. The Stark boys were either in Winterfell or protected by the army. Who else could be used to threaten the Duke? Joffrey saw Sansa, who was trembling all over. They used an underage girl, an innocent Sansa who posed no threat to anyone, to threaten Duke Stark. Joffrey frowned after realizing this. Originally it was just a play, and he didn't pay much attention to it, but now he felt that he was too naive. What kind of conspiracy and darkness must have been staged behind such a play to make it complete? The Duke's voice trembled. I betrayed the king, my good friend, Robert. I betrayed the trust of the late king. He shouted, I swore to protect his children, but when his body was still warm, I conspired to depose and kill his son and make myself king. The Duke said these words emotionally, and the grief and sadness contained in his words made people cry. What Joffrey heard was a dilemma. Now, I asked the High Sexton, the Sin who was loved by the gods, and the second highest gods to bear witness for me. Joffrey Baratheon is the only legitimate heir to the Iron Throne. In the name of the seven gods, he is the ruler of the seven kingdoms and the protector of the whole realm. Joffrey watched the Duke coldly as he finished his performance. This man did not tell the truth. At least the Starks believed in the old gods. How could he swear in the name of the seven gods? Stones flew out of the crowd and hit the Duke. The gold-cloaked guards held him up to prevent him from falling. More and more stones flew, and his forehead was cracked, and blood flowed. More stones flew and hit the gold-cloaked guards, and even hit Janos's breastplate with a clang. The upstart angrily checked the scratches on the black lacquered glaze. The situation gradually got out of control. The king's guard blocked Joffrey and his mother, and the nobles called for servants to come to protect him. The High Sexton knelt in front of Joffrey. Because of sin, we suffer. His voice was deep, calm, and rhythmic, as if he was reciting a hymn. This man confessed his sins in the presence of gods and mortals, on this sacred pulpit. The archbishop raised his hands and made a praying gesture, and the crown on his head flashed with colorful lights. The gods are fair, but the saints teach us that the gods are also merciful. Your Majesty, how should we deal with this traitor? The archbishop's words were gorgeous and sparkling, but his meaning was very clear. How could Joffrey not understand? He found that the least important role in this drama was himself. Although he was dressed gorgeously and was considered the most powerful person in the Seven Kingdoms, his position was really dispensable, and he even had only one line of dialogue, perhaps even less than that of ordinary people. After all, the king could not jump up from his chair and curse people casually. There was a lot of cursing from the audience, and most of the people supported the punishment of beheading. He sighed inwardly. What Sig said was absolutely right. Human nature is evil. Most of the people here who shouted for beheading did not know Lord Stark at all. They did not even hear what he was saying. They only knew that they wanted to behead and kill people because they were eager to see people die. They were like starving ghosts seeing food. They expected the noble head of the noble to fall. They did not care why this person admitted treason and what was behind it. Sighing, Joffrey knew that it was his turn to go on stage. Although he was unwilling, he still put on a high-handed style, just like he had been doing for more than 10 years. Fortunately, he was doing what he was used to, otherwise he would definitely be exposed. He calmly turned out from behind the shield and waved his hand to push away the flying stone. Although his right hand was painful, he stared at the audience with a fierce look in his eyes as if nothing had happened. The king's guard hurried over and was pushed away by him. The shouting and cursing from the audience decreased along with a number of stones. My dear people of King's Landing, you are wise and righteous. Joffrey's voice was also loud. It was the first time that he spoke so loudly on such an occasion. I know that the people in the audience are all loyal subjects of the Seven Kingdoms, loyal supporters of our royal family, and the most lovely followers of Baratheon and Lannister. His words sounded nice, but his tone was not so sweet. There were murmurs of confusion and whispers from the audience. He glanced at the important officials on the stage and saw Maester Pycelle with his head down, as if he was dozing off, Varys with a flattering smile on his face, and Littlefinger shaking his head in disbelief. His mother smiled with her lips pursed. Your Majesty, it's a good start. Now let's get down to business. The royal steward reminded him in a low voice. Joffrey looked around and realized that he was not respected, but just a puppet who was elected. I want to ask you a question. Joffrey took a step forward, getting closer to the people in the audience than any other nobles. You like to see blood, right? You don't care if this man is a real traitor, you just want to see the noble lord lose his head, am I right? The silence caused by anxiety and astonishment made the square strange and peaceful. He pointed at the servant in the front row who had thrown the most stones just now, who was still smiling foolishly. Hey, little brother, do you really care why Lord Stark died? Do you understand what treason is? Who did he betray? The crowned stag of Baratheon, or the three-headed fire-breathing dragon of the Targaryen family? Your Majesty, the royal steward reminded him again, and Joffrey waved his hand to shut him up. My lord, I don't understand what treason is. Since he said it was treason, then it's treason. He must have betrayed the Dragon King, so he betrayed the three-headed fire-breathing dragon. The self-righteous servant answered in a loud voice with a foolish smile. He didn't even know how terrible his words were. Catch this traitor! Janos screamed in exasperation from behind. 2 gold cloaks came and grabbed the boy who was stunned. My lord, I can't read and I don't know anything. Please don't blame me if I make a mistake. The people around him hated to make way for the plague, so that the gold cloaks could catch people more easily. Joffrey bet that the people around him didn't really understand what treason meant. In a moment, the numb people would shout and yell to behead this boy. What a clumsy drama, a disgusting drama. Chapter 121 Judgment. 3. Little Joffrey, I'm so sorry, but you have to play the villain this time. Violet's sad face was vivid in his mind, and Joffrey felt that she saw him too clearly. I'm not a fragile person. Joffrey replied. The conversation more than 10 days ago was still ringing in his ears, and he found that he had overestimated himself. It was not easy to be the villain in such a scene. He gestured to the gold cloaks to let go of the servant, just like waving away a fly. He was not dissatisfied with the gold cloaks, but with their masters. The servant was scared to wet his pants, and the people in the square noticed the unusualness and their voices gradually died down. Joffrey looked at the timid guy in front of him, but he was the one who shouted the loudest just now. If there were 100 guys like this mixed in a crowd, it would definitely liven up the atmosphere. Ridiculous public opinion. He waved his hand and asked someone to drive the servant away. If you are not prepared to be killed, I advise you not to shout for killing easily, otherwise, I may not be able to find a suitable head one day and have to borrow it from you. This time, the targets of his attention were the nobles and important officials. What he saw in the eyes of the bigwigs was not obedience and fear, but sneer and provocation. Among these people, there were many who were dissatisfied with him and even spit in their hearts, but these same people were willing to bow down at the feet of their grandfather. Why? Money, power, or the so-called leadership style. He knew that he could not delay any longer. The image of the new king who rose to power overnight and was extremely tyrannical has successfully taken root in everyone's hearts. My mother, he nodded to Tressae, and received a smile from his mother in response. Please ask me to let Lord Eddard wear black clothes. Then he winked at Sansa and kept scolding himself in his heart for being despicable and deceiving this lovely child at the last minute. Miss Sansa also pleaded for her father many times. After saying this, he smiled at Sansa, and the smile seemed to spread to the audience. Joffrey suddenly frowned, and was so reluctant that he even felt that his expression was stiff and ugly. That's because they are weak-hearted. After all, they are all women. He completed this task with a desperate attitude. In the eyes of others, he must be crazy. As long as I am king, traitors will be punished. Countless eyes came from all around, including those of his familiar ministers and his mother. The emotions behind these eyes were varied, but they were all full of doubts. Sir Ellen. He roared and turned to the corner of the pulpit. The royal law enforcer who had been prepared for a long time moved at the sound of his voice. Cut off his head for me. He never thought that his words would have such a heavy weight, and even he could not imagine that they could produce an effect like thunder. The square was quiet in an instant. The crowd was in an uproar, and among the many voices, the main one was still fanatical booing. What a bunch of hopeless idiots. I was pretending to be crazy, but the people in the audience were really crazy. The High Bishop grabbed his cloak, and Joffrey rudely pulled the cloak away from the bishop's hand. Viserys was no longer delicate and rushed up to him in a rage to argue. Really, if you panic when the situation changes slightly, what great things can you accomplish? Littlefinger's face turned blue, and he rushed over to make comments. Joffrey simply glared at him to shut up. Although he didn't want to kill people, this crazy act caused such a big wave that the high officials who seemed to be unmoved by other things finally threw away their unnecessary disguises, giving him a sense of pleasure and revenge. Finally, even his mother came up, pursing her lips as if to scold him. He didn't want to hurt her, so he turned away and ignored her. The nobles and knights made way for a passage, and he walked out. The king's lawman, Sir Ilan Payne, was tall and skinny, and it couldn't be more appropriate to describe him as a skeleton in iron armor. Joffrey couldn't imagine why Violet would associate with such a person. Sansa screamed. She knelt on her knees, and cried hysterically. Joffrey deliberately didn't want to look at her, although he wanted to go up to her to comfort her and tell her that it was all just an act. Sir Ilan walked over to Lord Stark. He made a gesture, his face grim, and there was no expression on his face since he appeared. It was as if he was wearing a mask. Janos ordered the gold cloaks to press Lord Stark to the marble slab, his head sticking out of the edge of the platform. Viser nodded to him, and Joffrey walked towards Lord Stark as required, as if to confirm that it was he who was being punished. Sansa was still screaming. A gold cloak grabbed the girl, otherwise she would have rushed to the scaffold regardless of everything. Joffrey had to turn back. He found the hound and motioned to him. The ugly warrior with a burnt face stepped forward quickly and roughly reached out to push aside the gold cloaks that were holding the Duke. Joffrey pretended that he and the hound would supervise the execution, and their cloaks, one red and one white, covered Ned tightly. Sir Ilyn drew out a two-handed greatsword from his back. He raised his hands over his head and held the greatsword in the air. The sunlight danced on the dark metal. The slightly warm sunlight reflected by the cold blade surface turned into a dark light of frost. Ice, the sharp blade passed down from generation to generation in the Stark family, a sword made of Valyrian steel. How ironic, Eddard Stark will die under his own sword. The cold light flashed, and the sword fell. A sigh. Something rolled on the ground, and blood splattered far away. Joffrey kept an eye on Sansa's condition. Since that day, Sansa moved out of Myrsala's residence and returned to the room in the high tower deep in Maegor's Holdfast alone. She threw herself into the darkness completely. No matter who it was, she ignored it. Even Myrsala was no exception. Myrsala blamed Joffrey for taking on this task. He himself had never regretted it. Although he did not love her, he was also very uncomfortable to see such a beautiful girl fall and wither before his eyes, and he was the culprit. The important officials, including his mother, quickly forgot Stark's death. Maybe Varys still remembered, but he was trying to downplay it, as if it was just a trivial matter, like breaking a porcelain bowl, or even tearing a piece of parchment, instead of chopping off a living head. From their eyes, Joffrey saw cruelty. Real cruelty is not doing those outrageous things, nor is it taking away a lot of lives, but the indifference to life. In King's Landing, in the court, most guys are so cruel. At most, they are annoyed because the little king is disobedient, but they will never mourn for Eddard Stark who should not have died. He knew the deeds of the Mad King. It is said that the Mad King summoned the old Duke Stark to the throne and ordered people to roast him alive with wildfires in front of Eddard Stark's brother, Brandon. That's not all, he also ordered people to put a noose around Brandon's neck so that he just couldn't reach the old Duke. Old Lord Stark was burned to death, and his son Brandon was strangled to death. What a cruel act. How many people in the court tried to persuade the Mad King at that time? None. What the Mad King did was essentially the same as what Joffrey did. They both wanted to kill people. The people around him were also cruel and indifferent to human life. The servants reported that Sansa drew the curtains on her bed and stayed in bed all day. She cried and slept, and continued to cry when she woke up, and slept again when she was tired of crying. The servants and servants could always hear the wailing of grief, and through the thin curtains, they saw the curled-up little body trembling there. They sent her 3 meals a day, but she would not touch them at all, and let the food pile up higher and higher on the table, and then someone would take the food away. Myrsala was worried that she would commit suicide, so she ordered people to add iron bars to the windows of the room. Joffrey was still worried, and ordered Grand Maester Seir to see her. The Grand Maester reported that Sansa was just frightened and would get better slowly. He really wanted to go see her in person, but he was afraid to see her, fearing that she would be more upset. You are not afraid of Sansa being upset, you are afraid of facing her. You are feeling guilty for what you did, you coward. Myrsala commented angrily. Why blame me? It's not my fault. Joffrey argued. But you did it. If you don't want to, Violet can't do anything about it, right? Myrsala glared back at her. For the first time, Joffrey blamed Violet in his heart for letting him take on such a responsibility. Chapter 122 The New King. 1. Please, let me go. I'm good. I'll listen. I'll say nice things. I'll do what you ask. Please don't kill me. Sansa's scream could be heard clearly outside the door. It didn't take long for Myrsala to come out of the room. Look at what you've done. Her cute mouth curved downwards, accusing. Joffrey cared about not only Sansa but also the people around him, especially Sir Meryn. He was his mother's man. He was not a real king's guard serving the king, but a guard serving the queen mother. Across Sir Meryn, he exchanged glances with the hound. Turning his head, he saw Myrsala glaring at him. He couldn't help but touch his nose. Really, it wasn't his idea. Myrsala knew this very well. Why was he always blamed? He stepped forward quickly, raised his foot, and kicked it. The door slammed open with a bang. Myrsala's gaze was like a thorn in his back. He didn't stop and rushed into Sansa's bedroom regardless of Myrsala's obstruction. You can't just go into a girl's room, Myrsala scolded behind her. What hit her was drowsiness and dead silence, as well as a sour smell. For a girl who loves beauty to accept this smell, Sansa must have been hit hard. He needed some acting skills to act more fierce. Pull open the curtains. A poor little thing stretched out its hand to block the light. Go open the window, and have someone clean the room. This is my fiancé's room. Who allowed the servants to be lazy and clean it? Sansa tilted her head and squinted her eyes. Her hair was tangled, and she was only wearing a nightgown. The scene was disgusting because of the dirtiness and mess. I've told you all not to barge into a girl's room. You're all knights and nobles, why are you so rude? Myrcella stood in front of the men like a mother cat protecting her cubs. Behind her, Sansa pulled the blanket down to her neck. No, she begged, please let me go. Joffrey looked at the people around him, himself, the Hound, and Sir Meryn. They were like lords visiting the slums, watching a poor little girl together. Sure enough, they were not disciplined enough. Get up and change your clothes and take a bath, or I'll let my dog change for you, he said viciously. Please, my prince, I'm the king. Joffrey pretended to be angry, wondering in his heart if he had gone too far. Dog, drag her down. Sandor Clegan's acting was better. Perhaps it was the added effect of his half-burned face. He lifted Sansa from the feathered bed, like a poor little kitten, and let her struggle weakly. The blanket slid to the ground. Child, do as he says. He pushed her roughly towards the closet. Put on your clothes. Surprisingly, the Hound's tone was very gentle. Joffrey glanced at the Hound unexpectedly. Myrcella took Sansa's clothes first and wanted to change her clothes, but was pushed away. I did what the Queen asked and wrote the letter. The content was all her wishes. You promised to show mercy, she was crying, except that she didn't cry. Could it be that her tears had dried up? Joffrey thought so. In the story, the real villains were just like this. Let me go home. She knelt on the ground haggardly. I won't betray you. I am very good. I will be obedient. I swear to you. I don't have the blood of a traitor, really not, please let me go home. She also lowered her head, and her tangled red hair fell to the ground. If you like. She maintained the etiquette weakly. Ridiculous etiquette. Myrcella's eyes seemed to kill people, and he didn't dare to look her in the eye. I'm not happy at all, Joffrey said stiffly. Father said I still have to marry you, so you have to stay. I ask you to be obedient. I don't want to marry you, Sansa said sadly. There were no tears in her eyes, but he could see that her heart was bleeding. You cut off my father's head. He's a traitor. Joffrey strengthened his tone, fearing that his soft heart would be discovered. I never promised to spare his life. I only said I would show mercy. I did show mercy and kept my promise. Joffrey suspected that he might be a born villain and could easily say such cruel words. If I hadn't promised you, I would have dismembered and skinned him. Yes, according to my heart, I would have skinned him alive and dismembered him. He shook his head, as if he had lost a wonderful opportunity. But I let him die quickly. I am really moved by my own kindness. You devil. Duh. It was Myrcella who spat. Joffrey wanted to glare back fiercely, but retreated because of the two burning gaze. He then noticed that Sansa was staring at him in a daze. What's the matter? He said fiercely. It's strange, why do I think you're handsome and elegant? Your lips are red and soft, like earthworms in the mud after rain. Your eyes are so cruel. I hate you. Sansa stood up, no longer weak, like an angry little wolf. Joffrey was hit hard. This time he didn't need to act. His heart tightened. He obviously didn't like her. Why did he feel uncomfortable when being hated? Father said that the king can't hit his own lady. Sir Meryn. According to the plan in advance, Sir Meryn must know how cruel he is. He grabbed Myrcella, who was going to stop him. His sister looked at him fiercely, her eyes were blazing, and her little hand pressed on the hilt of the rapier. The knight had a long snow-white brocade cloak on his shoulders, and the milky white glazed armor on his body was gorgeous and eye-catching. He quickly pulled Sansa's hand away and slapped her hard. The poor girl fell to the ground, her lips were broken and her nose was bleeding. She knelt on the ground, as if she wanted to stand up, but failed. Enough, all of you go away, don't force me to draw my sword. Myrcella inserted herself between Sir Meryn and Sansa. The latter took a step back, and the knuckles of her white silk gloves were stained with blood. Are you obedient, or do you want to continue to be taught a lesson? Joffrey was used to playing the villain, and he really had a talent for this. Sansa seemed to be stunned by the beating, shook her head, and reached out to wipe her ear, with a thin line of blood flowing from her fingertips. I will obey your orders, my lord. Yes, your majesty. He simply played the villain to the end and corrected him viciously. He really didn't like being this, his majesty. I want to see you in the court later. Not long after, Myrcella ran to catch up with him. While Sir Meryn was away, she hit him hard with a punch. "Why do you bully her like that?" "It's just acting, just pretending." Joffrey was a little afraid to face his sister, and sought the help of the Hound, but unfortunately the Hound suddenly became interested in the palace's architectural structure and concentrated on observing the ceiling. As a last resort, the new King Joffrey could only face his sister. He lost his arrogant and domineering momentum. "There is no other way. I have to do this, otherwise she will be in danger. I have to make her think she is really in danger, so she won't be exposed." Myrcella pinched him hard, making Joffrey grimace in pain. "My dear king, bastard brother, I don't care about being exposed or not. If you take the opportunity to bully Sansa again, I guarantee that you will have more holes in your ass." Joffrey raised his hands in horror. "What a terrible sister, God bless me. You saw it all, everything was just acting. I saved Lord Eddard yesterday, and you still said I did a good job." In the court, Joffrey saw Sansa again. She was wearing the green silk dress she wore on the day of the tournament. She had cleaned her hair and put on makeup, but her right cheek was still visibly swollen. Thinking of the beautiful and charming girl on the day of the tournament, Joffrey's heart ached and he quickly looked away. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novellas. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123 The New King. 2. The court was deserted, and the balcony for public airing was empty except for Sansa. Joffrey sat on the Iron Throne, cursing the designer of the throne in his heart. It would be strange for the king of a country to be in a good mood when such an uncomfortable table and chair were used to handle state affairs. Sansa was dressed in a dress and matched with makeup, and she was beautiful and beautiful. Her haggardness added a different style to her. She had not recovered yet, and the way she was holding back tears made people feel heartbroken. After these days of experience, Joffrey already had a whole set of views on the current situation, and as for the routine of handling political affairs, he became more and more familiar. But whether it was his mother or the ministers, no one was willing to let him decide anything. They were busy one by one, and no one would ask for his opinion or let him help do anything. As a last resort, he could only find some things to do by himself, and even took advantage of every opportunity to intervene in the process before the royal meeting made a decision. Is the king of the 7 countries so frustrated and act according to the faces of the ministers? There were several cases where Joffrey was not satisfied with the decisions of his ministers and overturned the decisions of the Council of Ministers, ignoring the objections of others. A thief was sentenced to have his hands chopped off by Sir Aelan. Joffrey insisted on sending him to the dungeons, waiting for the Night's Watch recruiters to arrive, so that he could be sent to the wall to experience a new life. 2 nights of the dispute over the ownership of an estate, and Joffrey changed the decision to let them duel, ordering Baelish to investigate before making a decision. A duel of combat is unfair. Even with the care of the gods, it is impossible for a dwarf to defeat a knight in a duel, even if the dwarf is on the side of justice. Joffrey adjusted the position of his buttocks to avoid sitting in one place for too long, which would cause blood flow to his thighs. I decree that trials by combat are prohibited throughout the 7 kingdoms. No one objects to the nobles' duel, but the judgment must be based on evidence. A woman knelt down and begged for the head of a man who was beheaded for treason. She said she loved him and hoped that the man could be buried with his body intact. Joffrey felt sympathy for such a woman who was in need of help, but he was afraid that being too kind would arouse suspicion. Although he didn't understand why Violet insisted that he act more cruelly, since he had promised her, he would definitely do it. In the court, he cruelly rejected the woman and had her kicked out despite her crying. At the same time, he also gave a wink to the Hound, who would send someone to follow the woman. Anyway, there were heads hanging on the walls now, and no one would notice if 1 or 2 were missing. Among the important officials, the one he hated the most was the frog-faced Earl Slynt. He stood at the end, wearing a conspicuous black velvet coat and a dazzling golden cloak on his shoulders. Whenever Joffrey made a judgment, this person would nod in agreement, and even if no one asked for his opinion, he would make a sound to express his appreciation for the wisdom of Joffrey's judgment. He hated such a flattering guy and was very disappointed that his mother insisted on using him. He secretly paid attention to Slynt's words and deeds, hoping to find his fault as soon as possible so that he could be expelled from the court forever. The last case was a fat-in singer who was accused of mocking the late King Robert. Joffrey sent someone to bring his harp and ordered him to perform on the spot. The fat man burst into tears and swore that he would never sing this song again. Joffrey insisted. The so-called mockery of the late king was mainly based on the lyrics, which were actually very interesting, describing Robert's fight with a pig, and the process was wonderful. However, some small details in the song hinted that the death of his mother and father was related. Joffrey keenly noticed the strangeness. This song cannot be written by you independently. Where did your inspiration come from? He stretched out his hand to stop his mother's intervention and said in a serious tone, Your Majesty, I dare not, I won't dare next time, I won't sing this song again. By the way, I have forgotten, I don't know any song related to the late king. The fat singer sweated like a stream, as if he had plunged into the water. Such a traitor actually made fun of a noble man. If he is not killed, it will not be enough to appease the public anger and comfort the spirit of the late emperor in heaven. Enough. Joffrey interrupted Pycelle rudely. The Grand Maester showed a very hurt expression. As long as we don't overemphasize this song, no one will pay attention to this clumsy and unrhyming tune. My father's soul is already enjoying happiness in heaven. If we have to pay attention to the underworld all the time, it will be troubled even in heaven. The Grand Maester doesn't have to deliberately emphasize the discomfort of others. He looked at his mother. The Queen Mother is the victim of this case, but you have always been magnanimous and naturally don't want to bother with the fat man. Without waiting for his mother to respond, he stared at the fat man. The song is good, but the lyrics are too bad. I think this is because you don't know how to read. I will punish you to pay tuition to Master Pycelle and let him find a suitable teacher for you to teach you to avoid making the same mistake again. The fat singer was naturally grateful. At this time, Joffrey made a look at Viserys, and the latter lowered his head in understanding. It is worth investigating who was the mastermind behind the scenes and who wrote the song for the fat man to sing. I believe that it will not take long for the octopus spider to find the source of the lyrics of the fat singer. After the afternoon court affairs, Joffrey felt sore in his back. He hated this chair more than that damn wild boar. But his mission was not over yet. After a whole day of court affairs, he realized that both his mother and the minister seemed to have some expectations of him. Obviously, such an attitude did not meet the standard of attire, and as Violet said, he apologized to Myrcella in his heart and intercepted Sansa, who wanted to escape with the hound. He was a little strange, why he only wanted to show his tyranny by bullying Sansa. Could it be that he didn't care about this girl as much as he thought? He pretended to carefully examine Sansa, who was cowering on the winding stairs. You look much more beautiful than before. Thank you for the compliment, Your Majesty. The girl was very good at disguising, making it hard to see that this was her false statement, but Joffrey was not so confident that he thought Sansa still loved him. Come with me to spread it, he ordered. In front of the ministers who were leaving one after another, he turned back into the arrogant and overbearing Joffrey. Sansa took his hand and stayed as far away from him as possible. My name day is coming soon, he said to himself as they left from the back door of the throne room. I will hold the most magnificent banquet. Although he pretended to be extravagant, the real Joffrey was worried about the huge debt in the treasury. It was unbelievable that the royal family could be so poor with the tax burden of the whole country. Everyone will give me gifts. What will you give me? I have nothing good to give, my lord, Sansa said absent-mindedly. Noticing his mother's team, he raised his voice, Your Majesty. His sharp tone made him uncomfortable. You are such a stupid girl who can't be taught. Mother told me a long time ago. Did she really say that? Sansa's expression showed that she was hurt again, and Joffrey almost wanted to slap himself. He realized that his mother had always been very good to Sansa on the surface. Of course it's true. Joffrey could only bite the bullet and answer, but he had made up his mind that he could not hurt the child anymore and had to find a way to let her know the truth. She is also worried that our child will be as stupid as you, but I told her not to worry. He gestured for Sir Meryn to open the door. Thank you, Your Majesty. Sansa began to learn her lesson, and the girl's expression was like a mask. The sunset was setting, and the walls of the Red Castle were painted with a layer of dark red in the twilight. Once you can have children, I will make you pregnant. Joffrey felt that he was basically arrogant, a villain. Myrcella was right. He didn't need to practice playing the bad guy. If the child is a fool, I will have your head chopped off. He tried his best to play the selfish guy, and he was really talented in this aspect. Also find a wife who is smarter and more beautiful than you. By the way, when can you have children? Sansa's face was red to her ears. Joffrey loathed himself more and more. Sister Mordin said, young ladies from official families usually mature at the age of 12 or 13. He led her closer to the city gate tower. Sansa pulled away from him abruptly. The girl squatted on the ground and trembled constantly. She obviously realized where she was going. No. Her breathing was rapid and her face was filled with fear. Please, don't do this. I don't want to go, I beg you. Joffrey pursed his lips. Even if it was a performance, he was still very resistant to this sentence. How bad must a person be to say such a thing to a girl like Sansa? I want you to see the fate of a traitor. Sansa shook her head frantically. No, I won't go, she screamed. Chapter 124 The New King. 3. I can ask Sir Meryn to drag you up. He realized that he was even more hateful than Sir Meryn. Believe me, you won't like that. Just do what I say. Sansa stepped back stubbornly and leaned on the hound. Child, be obedient. The hound pushed him to the king. As a true actor, the burned half of his cheek twitched a few times, as if he had something to say, but it was not convenient to say it clearly. Joffrey hated himself for taking on this hard job and hated the hound who had nothing to do and was a good person from time to time. Sansa's movements were firm, and her inner struggle could be seen. The brave girl finally took Joffrey's arm. He imagined himself in her situation. Could he really do everything she did? Climbing the stairs was a nightmare for the poor child. Every step she took was a struggle, as if she was stumbling forward in knee-deep mud. The stairs were not long, but what was it like for this girl? Just look at the beads of sweat on her forehead. At the top of the stairs, boundless fear was waiting for her. Joffrey was almost as scared as she was, but this step had to be taken, and it had to be done before Sir Meryn, so that Meryn would repay his mother, and he would be regarded as a completely tyrannical person, and then Sansa's redemption would come. That person must be waiting anxiously up there. As they were about to reach the top of the city gate tower, Sir Meryn, I need the Maester's telescope, bring it to me. He tried to use an imperative tone. The new king was a jerk, and he had to act like a jerk in everything he did. But your majesty. The sergeant hesitated, and Joffrey knew what he was hesitating about. Why? Are you afraid that I will kill her? Don't worry, I will let this child lie well before she feels the real terror and sees the fate of her rebellious brother and shameless mother. The Queen Mother has ordered me to protect Lady Sansa and stay with her all the time. Sir Meryn said so, his expression always lacked fear and respect. Joffrey knew that the sergeant was loyal to his mother, and for him, the sergeant didn't care at all. HMPH, Hound, helped the sir to understand who was the one giving the orders. Even my mother cannot disobey my orders. The Hound stepped forward and looked at Sir Meryn. This time the Hound didn't need to act. Sir Meryn bowed and stepped back immediately, and the action was done in one go. Watching him walk down the tower quickly, Joffrey felt better. For some guys, although you can't beat them up, it's good to teach them a lesson. Go up to the top of the city gate tower and overlook King's Landing. You can see the great September of Baelor on Visenya Hill. At the other end of Silent Sister Street, the charred ruins of the Dragon's Lair stand. The dim sunset painted most of the Gate of the Gods blood red. On the other side of the city gate tower, the golden sea level of the ocean spreads and extends to both sides. In the near distance, you can see the fish market, the docks and the surging Blackwater River. Sobering up from the peaceful gaze, Joffrey noticed that Sansa was also looking out. She looked fascinated, and it wouldn't be too surprising to jump off the tower immediately. What she longed for was not King's Landing, nor the beautiful scenery here. What she expected was the fields and farmland outside King's Landing and the far north. After crossing the neck, there was the towering castle in the north. Winter City. What are you looking at? Sir Meryn couldn't stay away forever. They had to hurry. I want you to see this, here. He unexpectedly found that he was used to speaking Deliver. The thick stone chests surrounded the edge of the top of the tower. Every few feet, there was a battlement for archers. The terrifying heads were located between the battlements at the top of the city wall, and iron gowns were inserted into rotten heads. The empty eyeholes of the dead overlooked King's Landing. This was the cruelest punishment of the king, making those who had lost everything immersed in that prosperity they could never enjoy. The girl wanted to ignore such a cruel scene with the beautiful scenery, but unfortunately he didn't want her to do that, because in this way she would miss the compensation and redemption he gave her. This is your father, he said cruelly. The Hound, this side, turn around and let her see. The girl's scream pierced the sky, and Joffrey frowned. He didn't want Sir Meryn to see this scene. What Sansa saw was not the head of Lord Stark, but his father himself. A black cloak with a huge hood was enough to cover his face. At this moment, Ned put down the hood, revealing a bitter face. Sansa had already pounced on him. She was no longer a lady, nor was she a reserved, poor girl struggling in the enemy's nest. At this moment she was his girl, a child who liked to get into her father's arms. Ned hugged Sansa quietly, his eyes red. Even Lady Stark must have never seen this scene. Joffrey, you are so cruel. Let me come here, Ned said in a trembling voice. This is the only place that won't arouse suspicion. Everyone thinks that the cruel new king enjoys making people suffer, which is just enough to convince people. Joffrey said seriously. He didn't like Duke Stark. Although this man seemed to have done nothing wrong, he killed many people. Even though he was able to sit on the Iron Throne because of his mistakes, he still hated this man. Dad, is it true that you are still alive? Or am I actually dead, and I am in the kingdom of night with you? Sansa seemed to be 5 years younger, and turned into a baby who couldn't even walk properly. She clung to Ned and refused to let go. This is all my fault. I know I should be punished, but my daughter is innocent. Let her go. Ned said with a bitter face, like a practicing monk. Sansa will leave, but not now. Joffrey said. He was relieved to see the girl crying with joy. Even if the girl hated him to the core, it didn't matter. That man talked to me, and recently I finally understood what he was going to do. I decided to help him. Lord Ned, don't you want to help him? Ned hugged Sansa Abelos and patted her gently. On the surface, he was comforting her, but in fact, he got more comfort. I understand. I also want to help that man, but Sansa will suffer. She shouldn't be treated like this. She is suitable for a stable life, marrying a wealthy noble, and living a peaceful life. That is the fate of my lovely Sansa. Joffrey narrowed his eyes. He hated Ned's argument. Wake up, no one can escape the predetermined fate. Only by helping that lord, we can truly usher in our own destiny. Sansa has recovered from her initial excitement. She raised her head and looked at them in confusion. My dear lady, I promised you that I would send you back to Winterfell when the time is right, but not now. We have to continue the show. You will be a hostage and I will be a tyrant. Sansa tilted her head. There was fear, confusion and various complex emotions in her eyes, but there was no love. Joffrey smiled bitterly. He had brought this upon himself. I want to tell you a message here, Lady Sansa. You are also responsible for the reason why we have fallen into this situation. If you had not been fascinated by the fairy tale of knights, if you had not blindly trusted my mother, how could you have betrayed Lord Ned's retreat plan? You, Arya and many others, including most of the people with their heads on the tip of the gown here, would not have fallen into despair. You must hate my mother, the gold cloaks and me in your heart, but have you ever thought that the culprit who caused so many deaths and caused your father to be seriously injured was yourself? All right. She is still a child. Ned roared at Joffrey like an angry direwolf. Joffrey shook his head. I'm just repeating what that lord said. There must be something hateful about pitiful people. Although the gods like to play pranks and are unreasonable, without gods, some tragedies will still happen. The Hound stepped forward and signaled to Joffrey. Well, Lord Ned, Lady Sansa, the time we meet is short. Sir Meryn is going up the tower. No one wants him to see the scene of the meeting. Joffrey almost pulled Sansa away from Lord Ned. Sansa fell at the feet of Sir Meryn who had just climbed the tower. Do you want to see other heads? He acted furious. If your majesty likes it. The two continued their performance in front of Sir Meryn. Joffrey grabbed Sansa's arm roughly and walked along the aisle, passing a dozen heads and 2 empty iron guns. These 2 are for Uncle Stannis and Uncle Renly. He told her. Many people had been dead for a long time, and although they were soaked in pitch, they became unrecognizable. Joffrey knew that he had to be cruel to keep the show going. He pointed to one of them and said to her, "This is the nun in your family." Chapter 125. The New King. For the New King's Hand. 1. Why did you kill her? She asked, not seeming to be acting. She's just a pious traitor is still a traitor. Joffrey was very unhappy. He realized that it was not just his father's problem. Most of the people around Sansa, most of the people she knew, probably more than half of them died in this disaster. If she is loyal to me, she should report your father's actions like you. Sansa's face was pale. It seemed that the relationship between the two could not be restored by the safety of Lord Everett Stark. You haven't decided what gift to give me. How about I give it to you instead? If you are happy, my lord. Sansa said this, with obvious anger on her face. She must have said the wrong thing on purpose. It is wise to end the conversation now. Unfortunately, Sir Meryn is right next to him. As a tyrant, he will not stop just because the little girl is unhappy. Your brother is also a traitor, you must know that. He turned Sister Mordun's head back. I remember that last time in Winterfell, my dog nicknamed him, the young master who plays with wooden swords. Right, good dog. Did he say that? The actor is still online, I don't remember it. Whatever. Joffrey shrugged. Your brother defeated my Uncle Jaime. He succeeded by deception and trickery. He was very curious about this. The King's Lair was a martial arts master, and his subordinates were even more powerful. It was not easy to defeat him, and it was even more difficult to capture him. He still remembered Sansa's brother Robb, a little kid who had just stopped having a runny nose. How did such a person defeat Uncle Jaime and capture him? Mother burst into tears as soon as she received the news. Women are really weak creatures. War and politics are not suitable for you. This is his true thought, no acting is needed. Don't be fooled by her apparent strength. She told me that I must stay at King's Landing to prevent my two uncles from attacking, but she is overthinking. Joffrey clenched his fists. I will gather an army and defeat your brother myself. Sansa, this is my gift, your brother's head. Maybe my brother will give me your head. Sansa frowned. Joffrey sighed. Where is the acting? Why did it turn out like this? Sir Meryn was eager to try, but Joffrey had already experienced the chivalry of this king's guard, and he didn't want to see Sansa's skin and flesh torn apart. Good dog, let the stupid woman know that a good wife will never joke with her husband. Give her a lesson so that she won't dare to do it again. And I want her to be beautiful, so don't hit her face. The Hound's method was much more clever than Meryn's. He grabbed Sansa's arm to prevent her from escaping, and hit her stomach hard with his huge fist with an iron glove. Sansa couldn't even scream, and mimicked the contents of her stomach all over the floor and all over her body. If he wasn't sure that the Hound would not really hit Sansa, he would definitely be very angry that the lady was treated like this. Don't cry all day long, it's annoying. Joffrey admired the acting skills of the Hound and Sansa. They might be drama masters who were delayed by their noble careers. You look prettier when you smile. Sansa's expression was as if she was in great pain, but she managed to force a smile. She portrayed the process of a poor woman forcing herself to smile in exchange for not being beaten up. Joffrey was under a lot of pressure. He never thought that the first big challenge after becoming a king would be acting. Stop drooling, you look so wobbly. Above the city gate tower, the outer breast wall was very high, reaching Joffrey's chest, but the inner walkway didn't even have a railing. The walkway was 70 or 80 feet away from the small square below. He walked side by side with her. Out of courtesy, he habitually walked on the part without railings. But it was this section of the road that made him walk shockingly. She didn't seem to be looking at him, but she seemed to be observing him with the corner of her eyes. In this position, if she pushed him hard, something terrible would happen, and no one would be able to save him. She wouldn't hold a grudge and want revenge, would she? Women are always narrow-minded, and he was unsure of this. But in this position, if she pushed him, she would probably be dragged by him and the two would fall into the small square together. Would she really dare to do this? He seemed to see two pools of blood spreading out in the small square. Come here, little sister, the Hound saved Joffrey, and he squatted in front of her, just between her and Joffrey, and gently wiped the color covered with vomit, with an incredibly gentle movement. Thank you, Sansa thanked her like a lady. The feeling of being on the brink of an enemy disappeared. Joffrey touched the back of his neck, and his clothes were soaked with sweat. My son is in their hands, Lord Tywin said sharply. Bronn noticed that the old lion's anger caused the temperature in the room to drop sharply. Yes, the messenger was a knight. His outfit was once splendid, but now only tattered cloth and armor full of scratches and dents remained. Dried blood covered most of the family emblem of the spotted boar. On the other side, the little devil made a loud noise with a wineglass. Bronn seemed to hear him complaining, I am one of your two sons. The little devil's elbow was still bandaged, and the dark red blood was faintly visible. He drank the wine with a grin and frowned. This was an impromptu call. Lord Tywin called all the important knights and lords. In the middle of the night, no one really complained about anything. If it wasn't a big deal, why would so many people be mobilized? The messenger took a lot of effort to get his posture right, and he needed the forget-me-not milk to maintain the correct expression during the report. He recounted the Battle of the Whispering Wood. In the long hall of the inn, only the firewood in the stove crackled. This is an inn rich in history. Bronn still remembered that the imp hated this place. It was a day before he learned that there was a problem with the direction of Riverrun. Lord Tywin ordered the army to march quickly at the cost of exhausting their physical strength. The losses were heavy. The wounded were the first to be left behind. Excessive physical exertion also caused many people in poor health to fall behind. Every morning when they broke camp, they could always see soldiers lying on the roadside, people who fell asleep and never got up again, and a large group of people collapsed on the roadside. He dared to bet that the number of deserters was several times more than those who fell behind. Bronn wanted to join the crowd of people who had fled at night several times, but he couldn't bear to give up the reward of the Lannister family. Before meal, the servant's hurried footsteps woke him up. Seeing the imp coming out of the room dressed neatly, he had to sigh and follow him. This is the sadness of being a bodyguard. The news brought by the messenger made him realize that this difficult journey was a waste of effort. Robb Stark has lifted the siege of Riverrun. This is unbelievable. Sir Harry Swift said painfully, even if we lost the Battle of Whispering Wood, we still have a large army under Riverrun. Jaime, why would Sir Jaime divide his troops into different locations? He must understand the dangers of dispersing our forces. His attitude was still reserved, and his inner conflict could be seen from his occasional glances at Lord Tywin. You chinless idiot. Tyrion cursed first. His temper had become much worse since the decisive battle. What does a flatterer know about siege warfare? Without waiting for Harris to refute, if it were me, I would have arranged the same formation, said Sir Kevin. Sir Harris, if you had seen River Run, you would know why it is arranged like this. River Run is located in the delta of the Red Fork River, where the Tumblestone River converges with the Trident River. The river protects both sides of the triangle. Once the city is in danger, the Tullys will open the extreme gates and artificially create a moat on the remaining side. River Run becomes an isolated island surrounded by the river. Sir Kevin said bitterly, the city walls are pulled out of the water, and the defenders on the tower can observe the military situation within several grids. To complete the siege, the besiegers must place large troops on the north bank of the Tumblestone River, the south bank of the Red Fork River, and the west bank of the moat. This is why Jaime arranged the formation like this. My lords, the messenger finally calmed down. Our army had long been prepared for sneak attacks. We set up barricades and walls around the camp, and built lookout towers in open areas. But the northerners were too cunning. We didn't have enough warning, and the river cut off the army's communication. When we really faced Stark's army, these preparations were far from enough. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.